I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Our mission statement here at Center Grove is, we develop knowledgeable, confident, and responsible citizens through inspirational and innovative learning opportunities. And with that, I'd like to read a little note this morning. First of all, we'd like to welcome all of you here this evening. It'd be great if we had a lot of you at lots of board meetings. But we would like to thank you for being here this evening. We appreciate the opportunity to hear from our parents. The partnership Center Grove has with our parents is what makes this district a great district and a great community. I would like to remind everyone here that our board meetings are meetings that are held in public. We conduct our business and vote as a board with the public, watching either in person or online. Our meetings are also recorded and posted on our district YouTube channel. We invite public comment on topics related to our agenda items at the appropriate times as outlined in our board policy. We ask that you respect these policies tonight and in future meetings. We will have an opportunity later in the agenda for public comments to be shared. We will listen to those comments. It will not be a question and answer session. We will have other opportunities for questions from the public to be asked and answered in the coming weeks, and you will hear those opportunities tonight during the presentations. So again, we do thank you. We welcome you here this evening. We hope to have a very productive evening tonight. So, on our next thing is to the adoption of the agenda. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. President, I'd like to amend the agenda and add a report for the back to school, there it is, the return to school plan. The 21-22 return to school plan. I'd like to move that up to reports.
Thank you, Mr.
And have
Alexander.
it listed as a report, and then we'll vote on it as an action item.
Exactly. Thank you. Any questions on that? I do want to remind people, you'll see that there's only 4 board members here present, but we do have Mrs. Counts is present on the phone. She will be popping up on the screen hopefully once in a while, because tonight, when we do votes, we will have to do it in a roll call situation. So bear with us, technology, and it's raining, so who knows. So thank you, Mr. Alexander. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. All those in favor, or nope, I got to go down through it. Mr. Hubbard, aye or nay?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander?
Aye.
Mr. Daniels?
Aye.
Aye. Mrs. Counts, are you with us?
Aye. I
Okay,
am.
good.
Aye.
Okay. Do we have to have her on the screen?
Yeah, she's on screen.
Okay. I see her now. And you look fine, Mrs. Counts. And myself.
You're so nice.
And myself, that makes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Our next area is reports, and our first area is critical race theory delineated. Oh, sorry,
COVID.
back up. Our next area is the COVID report.
The back to school plan, thank you.
Back to school plan.
Thank you, yes.
I've had 5 meetings today. Thank you.
So, as
Dr.
they come up-
Arkanoff.
Thank you, Mr. Bristol. As they come up to the podium, we have today with us Mrs. Amy Norman. She is our Director of Health Services and also our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources and Health Services, Mr. Jason Taylor. So I will turn the podium over to them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arkanoff. We're pleased to share the return to school plan for this school year. Last year it was all-inclusive of academic changes and a number of other changes we had to make to start the year. This year's really just going to be focused on health and safety changes, some things that we're able to change from last year going into this school year. I want to start by just sharing some of the recommendations that we received from the Indiana Department of Health are listed here in front of you. It was a recommendation for masks for all unvaccinated individuals, social distancing of 3 feet, and in classrooms and with the students facing forward, assuming that they're masked if they're unvaccinated. and then 6 feet in all other areas. Individuals should stay home for 10 days following the onset of symptoms. If all students are masked, you see we have a difference in how we would contact trace those students and eventually quarantine students. If they were masked, it would be contact traced and quarantined at 3 feet. If they were unmasked and not facing forward, it would be at 6 feet. And then they did offer 3 options for students to return early, on day 8 after exposure, on day 11, and on day 12. And you'll see some of the, or day 15, thank you. You'll see some of this play out as Ms. Norman and I present through the slides tonight. We also were very pleased to receive some recommendations from the Johnson County Health Department that we really felt fell more in line with our community's expectations. This was that schools would still continue to contact trace positive cases, that they would be able to use the 3-foot distance for that tracing, no matter if a mask was worn or if it was not, and that 3 foot could also apply in the cafeterias. They would be willing to allow individuals to return on day 11 without a negative test. If you'll remember at the state, that was actually a day 15 return, and without enhanced precautions, which we'll cover again a little bit later in the presentation. A positive test in prior school years would only allow a student to avoid quarantine if they had been positive in the last 90 days. Our county was willing to expand that to 6 months. We talk a little bit there about home tests, that it should be independent for that qualification. And that schools may also accept an antibody test, which Ms. Norman has been excited to be able to accept that option. Looked at it last year and we just were not allowed to do that. And then finally, they do have a number of rapid tests available, no appointment necessary. You walk right in Franklin. It's near the Masonic home, and you can get that test very easily. Anything I've left out on the state and the county recommendations? Amy?
No, those are the main ones.
Thank you. We also know that the state legislature and the governor really transitioned some of the decision-making on COVID and the spread down to the local level. And so after July 1st, 2021, local school boards will be responsible for implementing whatever measures and restrictions are deemed necessary and prudent to address the impact and spread of COVID-19 for their buildings, facilities, grounds, and including transportation. So we really took that to heart. We spent some time gathering some input from the school board and other community members, working with our staff, our teachers, and our principals and our administrators to kind of look at what are things that would be right and a right fit for Center Grove schools that maybe weren't fully in line with what the state had mandated in the past. We also are extremely pleased with the vaccination rates in White River Township. You'll see our 3 major zip codes are represented here. And their percentages are all above 60%, with Bargersville and some of the areas in the south being above 70%. That's really amazing and awesome. We feel like that allows us to make some decisions in our community when we know we have a high saturation of vaccinated individuals. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Norman. She's going to cover then some of the recommendations we'd like to make tonight, and some of the policies and procedures that really she lives in day to day. And this ultimately falls on her responsibility, our school nurses, and they work with our principals on it. So, Ms. Norman.
Thank you. Face coverings, what we are proposing is that face coverings will be optional under most circumstances. This would include classrooms, hallways, cafeterias, the athletic facilities. One thing to keep in mind, I know previously it said, that the school boards had some jurisdiction over the transportation, but currently there is a federal mandate per the CDC order. So regardless of vaccination status, currently if kids are riding the bus, they would still be required to wear a mask. The Center Grove bus drivers, though, will not refuse transportation to any student due to the lack of a face covering. If a student requests a face covering, we will do everything we can to make sure we have those available to them so that they have them when they get on the bus. There may be situations, though, in our schools where a face covering would be required. For example, the primary one is if you're a close contact and you've been quarantined and you opt to come back on day 8 with a negative test. In that situation, on those days 8 through 11, you would still be required to wear a mask. That's an enhanced precaution that would still need to be in place. It's also possible that it would be required within our school clinics, particularly for symptomatic people who come into our clinics. If somebody were to come in with scraped knees, I'm probably not going to mask them up for that. We'll just take care of the scraped knee. If they're coming in with complaints of cough, sneezing, fevers, things of that sort, we're going to ask them to put a mask on while they're in the clinic with us. They may also probably be seeing their nurses in masks still this year. in looking at kind of what our classrooms will look like, kind of the goal is to get to business back as usual from what we had prior to the pandemic. Our classrooms are going to continue to try to use, at the elementary level, pod seating with the goal of 3-foot distance where possible. If you get out a measuring tape and measure 3 feet, generally speaking, it's not really that far. It sounds far when you're trying to think of it in your head, but when we would sit in the chairs last year when we were at 6 feet, that was really, really hard to manage in a crowded classroom. I'm not saying that 3 feet won't still result in some close contact, but we were doing 3 feet at the end of the school year last year, and we were able to dramatically reduce what quarantine looked like for students. Our cafeterias in the elementary setting are also going to be, we're trying to still get to that 3-foot goal. And, in situations where there's increased exhalation, which is kind of a difficult thing to sort of determine, we would probably look at doing our best to kind of increase that to 6 feet where we can. We're going to still do recess. If the kids, if students have, families have chosen that they want their students to wear masks at school because they're not vaccinated, which is still a recommendation. But again, we are going to have masks be optional, so that's kind of a family choice of what you want to do. When they go outside to play on recess, they won't need to wear their mask, but that's something for you to talk to your child about. If you want them to do that, instill that in your child, but we won't be requiring that at recess. And we're going to resume field trips. I think the key in the field trip component is that wherever we are traveling to, we will be required to follow whatever their requirements are, if they're more stringent than what we do, okay? And so that is, we're going to be sending home information in regards to those field trips. And be mindful, that stuff can change rather quickly. So maybe have a few masks on hand just in case if you need to send them. Secondary school, we're going to return, again to normal seating, hopefully with the goal of still 3 feet of distance. To be honest, when you're sitting about, 12 inches from somebody, it can be kind of uncomfortable. So hopefully we can kind of still maintain a little bit of distance there. Cafeterias also will return to that normal seating. Again, if we are noticing the, exhalation issues and things like that, we're going to ask that they try to space kids out a little bit more if it's possible. Our ECS are going to return to normal, and again, field trips are going to resume. So through all of this, we're still going to ask if you have a positive case. If your kids are symptomatic, we want them to stay home. If kids are sick, number one, whether it's COVID or not, if kids are sick, they don't learn well at school. So please keep them home. I would rather they're home for a couple days and get to feel better and then come back raring to go to learn. Please, if they're having COVID symptoms, consider getting them tested. It's not a requirement, but consider doing that. If there is a positive test result, we will be looking at contact tracing. So we're still going to be looking at seating charts, checking out classrooms, probably talking to teachers to see, is there something that we've missed? Was there, intense group work happening in a space? Those types of things that might not show up on a seating chart. So then you, as parents, we are going to utilize Parent Square and email to make those notifications. There will also then be a hotline number that you can call so that you can get, if you have additional questions, please let us know. I will probably be the person returning those calls. So I do try to make it my goal to get back to people very, very quickly, because I know that this is a lot. It's a lot to kind of deal with. So I take that very seriously. If the impact, what we're looking for is kind of that direct, close contact that is going to be, we're concerned about transmission of disease, okay? And the likelihood that your student maybe is going to be testing positive as well. So again, if there is a situation and we contact you, my request is just, if you have questions, please let me know. I'm here to try to help and educate. And I know not everybody agrees with everything, but we will do our best to try to keep everybody as safe as we can with things.
I think the last thing there was parents may have the option to quarantine their kids.
Oh, yes, yes. So we're still awaiting guidance. I know last year, obviously, if you have cases in your home, that's honestly where we're most concerned about spread. So if somebody in your home tests positive, we're going to ask that you continue to quarantine your kids in your home and let us know about that. The one big question that that's not been addressed for us is how those absences are going to be counted. So looking ahead, so I know there's been obviously quarantine stinks and nobody likes it. My goal is to keep it as much of a minimum as possible. For our kids in 6th grade and younger, this is something that they kind of have to deal with more than our 7th and above. Just because the 7th and above have a little more opportunity to get vaccinated. Their ages warrant that if that's something their families choose. The one thing is that COVID is a communicable disease. By Indiana code, communicable diseases have to be handled in a specific way to try to contain spread. It's not much different. It's not any different than if we had a chickenpox case. I have dealt with that in our schools. We usually don't quarantine for chickenpox, primarily because it's a school-required vaccination. So when we find close contacts of somebody with chickenpox, they've been vaccinated, therefore they don't have to be quarantined. So you don't hear about this as much. This is kind of a little different. One of the things that the county health department has changed for us is that going from the 6-foot to the 3-foot, they've also changed that it's a 10-day quarantine regardless of, you don't have to get tested to come back on 10 days. If you come back on day 11, you don't have to have enhanced precautions, which that was something we were not able to achieve last year. So that was why we stuck at you had to return on day 15, which if any of you had children who were quarantined, as I did, it was hard. In the situation of extracurricular activities, those are going to be handled on a case-by-case basis, depending on what's going on. Particularly, we're going to be looking at what type of contact. Last year, at the beginning of all of this, we had to quarantine the entire tennis team. Now under this new guidance, we probably would have maybe quarantined one person, if any, because it doesn't now fall under the same parameters as what we were kind of dealing with last year. So this is kind of what returning from quarantine looks like. The key to this is the being asymptomatic, which means you don't have any symptoms after you've been exposed, okay? And a symptom can be, if you've been exposed and you didn't have any symptoms before, and then you suddenly are having, you have a kid who's never had a headache in their life, and 2 days after you've gotten a call that they're a close contact, they suddenly have a headache, that's a symptom, okay? So that's something to kind of be thinking about. What we've looked at is on day 8, if there's no symptoms, we could do if you have a negative test, it would have to be an independent test. A rapid test that's through the health department would work for that. And then you agree to follow the enhanced precautions until day 11, meaning you mask up the entire time, you sit 6 feet away from people at lunch, things like that, then you could return like on that day 8. Day 11, after exposure, you would not require, there's no test required, and you just come back. There's no enhanced precautions needed. You just come back to school like you normally would. The other key to this that's changed is that previously, we didn't have vaccine last year. So this year, if we have proof of someone being fully vaccinated, they will not have to quarantine. If we have proof of an independent COVID positive test, which means an at-home test cannot be used for this purpose. But if you have an independent positive COVID test, which are free at CVS and Walgreens and the health department and those places, it provides you with a piece of paper that verifies the proof. That will last for 6 months. This will go back to students who tested positive at the end of the school year last year. If we have record of that or we can verify that through the health department, then they will have 6 months kind of a free pass. They won't have to quarantine. I am leaning towards, I still want to notify families if their students were potentially exposed, just because I think it's important for you to know, because you could still become symptomatic. And I want you to be aware of that and monitoring your kids. but they are still able to come to school if they've had that positive test within the past 6 months. The other key that the county has offered us is antibody testing. And so if you have proof of an antibody test within the past 6 months that states that you have positive antibodies, that will also work so that you do not have to quarantine, or your student does not have to quarantine. Down at the bottom, there's kind of what that enhanced precaution thing looks like. So that's again more for that day 8 component of it. Which again is just, there's no exceptions. You got to wear your mask all the time. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, thank you. And really want to thank Ms. Norman for being willing to look at the day 8 option for our students. That's something I don't think you'll find in the other school corporations nearby either. We feel like we have a strong staff and we're able to offer some of those options and keep kids safe and get them back quickly. So we're excited to do that. We're going to allow the return of visitors in our schools. We're kind of taking an approach thinking about when are our buildings, when are students mandated, when do they have to physically be in our building to get educated? And we've got some rules for that. And then when there's outside of the school day, more voluntary opt-in activities taking place, we've got a second kind of set of rules for that. And that's where you'll see some of these breaks. So currently, we would allow volunteers and visitors into the building. We would ask that they wear a mask, again, to protect all students within the building at the time. If they are able to, willing to provide, we would provide an opportunity that they could provide their proof of vaccination, and then we could allow the mask wearing to not happen at that time. But again, that's to protect the students who do need to be in our buildings every day and have to be. Right now, in the elementary schools, we're not ready for lunchtime visitors to come back. We're still spreading kids out quite a bit. It's hard to find those little nooks and crannies for parents to come in. We need all that space for our students during the day. And then building rentals, again, will resume. Visitors should be vaccinated or wear a mask while they're in the building. That's something we're not going to really check at the door. It's going to be a lot like going to Kroger or one of the shopping centers where it's we expect folks to be open and honest about that and their current status. We are going to continue all of our focus on hygiene and cleaning. We will still have hand washing campaigns out and about all the buildings, hand sanitizer available. Our custodians will continue their extra cleaning of high-touch surfaces and areas. Much like last year, we are continually improving all of our air filtration systems in all of our schools. We're very fortunate that we were ahead of the game in a lot of our buildings there, and we're catching up any building that may not have been where we wanted it. So that's been an awesome project that our operations team has really tackled. And then we'll have bottle fillers available. Drinking fountains can come back. We may bring some of those back too, but the bottle fillers are really popular and it's working really well, and we're going to definitely keep those in place. So a summary, something that we'll talk about, and again, we'd ask the board to take action on later tonight, are these recommendations that we've made. Again, I'm just going to summarize this slide, that it's mask optional, it's the continued use of pods, trying to get kids spread out socially to avoid the quarantines as much as possible. Individuals shall stay home for 10 days following those symptoms or a positive test result. Regardless of masking, we're going to stick with the 3-foot distance as we do contact trace and quarantine students. And again, that's for 15 minutes. And then asymptomatic close contacts may return on that day 8 with those that negative testing and precautions, or all cases could return back, and quarantine students could return back on day 11 that are asymptomatic, I think is the key word there. Kind of continued on these recommendations. We do want Center Grove, we're going to continue to monitor our COVID-related absences. We will publish that on a dashboard online, much like we did last year, so folks can be informed of how our buildings are performing and if we are seeing spread within our buildings. We'll work with the Johnson County Health Department to offer the rapid testing option. Ms. Norman would like to try that on site. We're going to work towards that. We need to secure the test, and we'll work out those logistics so a student could pop in that morning, get tested, and the parent could take them on to school. That's really where we'd like to get to. And then finally, this is going to change. It changed this morning on us. It will probably change a little bit next week. It's hard to tell which direction it may change, looser, tighter kind of thing. So really would like to ask the board that while we do want your support on these recommendations that we offer, that we give Dr. Arkanoff some empowerment here and some authority to plan some changes after consulting with you so that we can make some quick changes if we need to throughout the school year. However, anytime we do make those changes, we're going to bring those back to the board. We're going to allow the public to have some public comment and input on those if necessary, if it's some sweeping large change. And we do want the community to be informed, but we also know we may have to make some quick changes to keep our students safe and secure. Anything I left out there, Ms. Norman?
No, I don't think so. I guess I would like to make the point that when we're talking about quarantine, quarantine happens from the date of exposure. I know that last year I got a lot of questions in regard to that, like, well, how come, that it dates back 5 days? Well, if somebody has symptoms and waits a couple days to see how they're doing, and then they get sicker, and then they go get a PCR test, which takes 2 or 3 days, it can be 5 days before we know. And so that's kind of why that sometimes happens and how that sometimes happens. Some parents run out the second their kid has a sniffle. Some parents will wait it out a week and a half. And so, again, I think the key is that if your child is not feeling well, please have them stay home for a day or two and see how that's going. If they're trending upward, or if they're trending downward, maybe get that checked out a little bit more, so. But I also think, one of the things that we have, I think, with this plan that helps is the Johnson County Health Department is monitoring kind of where spread is in the community. So as of today, we're at like 2.6% for the positivity rate. So that helps us to be able to be a little more open, and a little more business back to usual because that positivity rate is so low. And my hope is it's going to stay in that position, so.
Thank you. One last note, I know folks will have an opportunity for some public comment tonight, but this doesn't have to be the end of that input. Ms. Conrad has already set up some great webinars. We will speak with our staff next Tuesday online in a coffee chat setting, and then on Wednesday we'll have some time available for parents. So look forward to getting more back and forth comments and feedback that way as well.
Thank you both. Before we get any questions from the board, I also want to remind, this evening, later in the agenda will be a vote on this. So right now, it's just really your opportunity to ask for some clarifying questions and so forth. And as Jason shared, we will have more opportunities. We have a coffee chat coming up, and this will be one of the major topics during that process. So,
Okay, board, any questions for Mr. Taylor or Mrs. Norman?
I don't have any questions about the report. I'll save my comments when we go to vote on it.
Okay.
I have no
Amy?
questions at this time either.
Okay. Amy, do you have any questions? Mrs. Counts?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Well, at that time, thank you so very much for your report. I know it's
Thank you for the opportunity.
fluid report, it's ongoing, and as they said, just this morning, we got some changes on this, and that can happen in another week when you're dealing with federal, state, county guidelines, and those three don't always work together. It can be changing, but we would like to publicly thank both of you. The work you have to put into this is something else. Thank you so very much. Okay, our next order of business, okay, is, under reports, is Community Mental and Behavioral Health Services. Back it up.
not yet. Close.
I was just gonna skip over that. Is that important? Okay, back it up. Our next order of business, critical race theory delineated. Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Russell. And I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I appreciate it. You may not have heard about this topic, critical race theory, or CRT, but I'm going to talk about that this evening. I just also want to remind everyone that this is a live stream, and we save it online, so you can go back and watch it. And particularly, I share that tonight because of, you probably have a lot of questions swirling through your head over what we just shared on our back-to-school plan. So you should be able to get back in there and watch it later tonight or tomorrow. So, or if you enjoy this talk, you can watch me again. So, so this is really a report to the board, but I'm sharing it with all of you. Why am I here today? I'm sharing this is that my leadership team and I, and many of you board members, have heard from parents that we do not want critical race theory taught in our schools. Others have reached out following a presentation made to 5th grade students at Pleasant Grove Elementary. That presentation was not approved by the Teaching and Learning Department of Center Grove, nor would it have been based on some of the terms and concepts included in the slides. Some of the concepts in the slides are associated with critical race theory, or otherwise known as CRT. Why is CRT not appropriate? CRT is an academic concept that is studied at the post-secondary level. It's not part of the Indiana State Standards for curriculum, and we do not think it is appropriate for K-12 education in Center Grove. What we are doing here at Center Grove? Well, as you know, Center Grove's vision is to provide exceptional educational experiences for all students. And we are doing this by providing a guaranteed and viable curriculum in our schools. We have a system in place for our traditional subjects. And we have now extended that system to our counseling department to ensure oversight of the content and continuity in those lessons they provide across the district. Dr. Hoover and Mrs. Burglar will be sharing more about our counseling department in a few moments. We want to earn your trust through transparency and by listening to you. We will be posting social emotional learning lessons planned by counselors for our elementary students on our website for parents to view. We are also planning an opportunity for all of you to learn more about these lessons later this month, Wednesday, July 21st at 6:30 p.m. in the Innovation Center. We'll be providing a parent information meeting where we'll have an opportunity for more feedback. We value our partnership with parents, and we will be looking for volunteers to be a part of our strategic planning committee, as I kind of shared in our last meeting, and I see familiar faces now, so I'm hoping that you'll come to that. As I shared in the past, we are finishing up and wrapping up Strategic Planning 2.0. That we were really fortunate. We asked for at least 100 parents to get involved. We pushed and we pushed, and we got 300 parents involved, and it was fantastic, and it really helped. And a lot of great things came out of that process through working with our parents. So as we get ready to launch Strategic Planning Process 3.0, we will be seeking more parent input and parent participation. So I hope that you keep an eye out when we start sending out all the messages that we send out to get you involved and ask for you to be a part of that. So that's my report as to the issue of CRT and the fact that Center Grove does not use critical race theory and will not use it. So any questions from the board, I'll be glad to take on. Yes, sir.
Turn your mic on.
So you're going to roll out a way for parents to be involved in the strategic planning committee later?
Yes, yeah, we're going to be doing that. We'll be doing that here in a couple of weeks. We need to get the start of school going, and then we're going to organize out kind of we do a big push through social media, through our websites, through our email, and all of that, and really try to get people from across the board to get out to participate.
Why does that benefit the schools for parents to want to get involved in the strategic planning committee? Like why?
Oh, yeah, that's great. Great question. I mean, there's so much that goes on in the schools. As you know, it's a K-12 process. It's actually pre-K. We have pre-K at Sugar Grove. And there's a lot to be considered. And the last time we had our strategic plan, we heard from parents about the need to organize our character education program, for example. We have six elementary schools, and they were all doing something a little bit different in character education. And we found that it would be really beneficial to all of our parents and our students that kind of thing was organized across the board so that it's guaranteed and viable, no matter if you start at Pleasant Grove and you end up at Maple Grove for whatever reason, particularly when we redistrict. I'm not saying we're going to, but if we have to, then you know that it's going to be the same.
You did not hear that.
But also too, Mr. Hubbard, it's a great question because parents bring things to us sometimes that, we're not thinking about. That's important. And so we need that input. And a lot of times too, we're educate parents on what we do that they go, wow, I didn't know you do that. I didn't know that was something that we needed to think about. So it's really good to do that. And a couple of years ago when we did it, we had realized some issues with our extended learning program. That's our enriched program. We were able to revamp that and provide and grow that program a little bit more. So those are just some examples of that. In fact, I believe too, one of the process created a complete revamp of the website. We launched a whole new website based on feedback and so forth, so, yeah.
Okay, so obviously you were talking about CRT. So CRT is something that we're not interested in doing at Center Grove, but do you, in your opinion, do you see an overlap between CRT overlapping into SEL at all?
Not in Center Grove. Now, I can see where people will make that connection in some cases. When you look online and you can see where some organizations have tied some things to it, I get that. But in Center Grove, that's not the case. And that's what you're going to see from Dr. Hoover this evening and Christy Berger.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I would like to reiterate on the strategic planning committee that hopefully we can get going this year. Health and safety stays good. I've been on it twice, and as he says, you don't realize sometimes what you're seeing out there, what we think you're seeing out there, so that combination of working back and forth, and it really does help if there's at least 100 people involved with that and the way the process works, and new programs come out of that, or a new direction. As he also mentioned, we work very hard to make sure our elementaries are all on the same avenue, so to speak, because we have become a more mobile school system of in and out, but also within our elementaries, because it's just the way things work with where people need to live sometimes. So strongly urge you to keep your ears open, and we'll be reaching out to that for members for the strategic committee. Any other comments?
Mr. President, might
Yes.
want to make sure Mrs. Counts doesn't have any questions.
Thank you. Mrs. Counts with us? Do you have any questions for Dr. Arkanoff?
I do not.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you.
Now, our next order of business is Community Mental, Behavioral, and Health Services. Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you. This evening, we have a report from, let's see who's coming up. I see, okay, Dr. Hoover is going to share with you some information along with some members from Community Health. So, Dr. Hoover?
Yes, thank you. I want to introduce Becky Mills. She's the program manager for Center Grove school-based programs through Community Health Network. We started our partnership with them last year in July, and she wants to provide you an update of the work that they've been able to do this year to support students. She oversees six therapists and 5 life skills clinicians. She serves as the liaison between Community Health and Center Grove Schools, works very closely with our Director of School Counseling and Mental Health, along with our principals and our counseling team. And so that really inclusive work is providing a lot of supports to our students. She's going to be sharing how they've supported in this last year, along with some data, and also the plans for the upcoming year, how they're going to continue to enhance the programming that we're able to do for our students.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have been fortunate enough to be part of this transition from the previous mental health center provider to the current one. I came on board, again, I'm Becky Mills, program manager with Community Health Network school-based programs, but I came on board to this partnership it officially started July 1st of 2020. I was fortunate enough to be part of that partnership a little bit prior to that, but when we started, we began with one clinically licensed therapist and one bachelor's prepared life skills clinician serving all of the buildings within Center Grove schools. And we quickly learned that the need is definitely here for those mental health support services in Center Grove schools. And in November, we hired on an additional clinically licensed therapist as well as an additional life skills clinician. January, February timeframe, we added a third clinically licensed therapist and life skills clinician. The referrals kept coming in. Unfortunately, as in many professions right now, there is a national workforce shortage in terms of mental health providers. And it became very clear that our therapists and life skills clinicians were doing the best they could, but did not feel great about the quality of services that they were providing because they were stretched so thin. And so it became very clear that we needed to support our therapists in different ways because we wanted to provide that quality care that the students here deserve. In conjunction with the Director of Mental Health and Counseling Services, we made some decisions that we would need to put a pause on enrolling new clients so that we could provide that quality care. We did not want to put the youth that we were serving at risk, and so we did put a pause on that while we were looking to hire additional therapists and life skills clinicians. And then in addition, we made the decision to not limit ourselves to those therapists who are clinically licensed, but also bring on mental health professionals who are master's prepared. Difference being the ability to serve the commercial insurance population. Clinically licensed therapists are able to serve those with private insurance, whereas mental health professionals without that clinical licensure status are not able to serve commercial insurance, just the Medicaid population. And so we recognized that we were potentially limiting the service delivery in doing so, but we wanted to make sure that we could still offer our services out beyond the scope of where we were at the time. So we ended the school year with 4 therapists and 4 life skills clinicians. And at the end of the school year, we were at, presently at 233 active clients. We have enrolled a total of 276. Some have successfully completed services, some have transitioned out of services, or transferred to an outpatient office, that sort of thing. But we have been really excited about the services we have been able to provide, and throughout the summer, we have hired additional therapists. We are now at 6 therapists. We have 3 clinically licensed, 3 licensed therapists, but not clinically licensed, and then 5 life skills clinicians. So that's where we are right now, and our goal in the very near future is that we will bring on additional therapists, whether it's clinically licensed or not clinically licensed, so that there will be 1 therapist per building is our goal. Because we recognize what that does for the partnerships, communication with the school, to address the needs of the individuals that we're serving, as well as supporting the school as a whole. In addition, as the school year does begin, we are at this time actually opening up enrollment again, so that we are no longer putting a pause on those enrolling new clients. So what are the trends? What are we seeing? Historically in school-based services, we are serving a wide array of diagnostic categories. So we're looking at anything from anxiety, depression, trauma-related disorders, impulse control. What we're seeing here, and this is the data in Center Grove, so for our active clients, matches what we have seen across the board in terms of our school-based services. So what you see here is the majority of our clients in Center Grove are diagnosed with an some form of anxiety disorder. We also have anxiety disorder is 31%, 34% ADHD, and 24% depressive disorders. So what I want to highlight there is the mental health disorders that the youth we're serving experience run on a continuum. So you're going to see some who experience them at a much greater level than others. You're going to have some that are manifested in externalizing behaviors, some more internalizing behaviors. Not one is more important than the other, and that's what we want to recognize. And just because someone has one payer for their services versus another, not one child deserves more support than another. And so we want to make sure that we're serving everyone. The pandemic, unfortunately, has created more challenges in this area. We're seeing more depression, more anxiety, and unfortunately, for some people, we haven't even seen the symptoms begin to manifest at all. So while some individuals, as I don't know if we call life returning to normal, somewhat normalcy, as things begin to open up as they previously had, some people's symptoms will diminish and things will get back to some sense of safety and security and normalcy for them. However, others, it creates, just as when the pandemic came on, feelings of uncertainty, fear, worries. And so unfortunately, For some people, it's only going to get worse from here on out. And that's what we want to make sure that we're doing is providing the available supports for the youth, no matter what the challenges are that they're facing. So if you have not heard of ACE scores, you probably will at some point, but Adverse Childhood Experiences is what the ACE stands for, and that is a screening tool that is utilized linking trauma experiences to higher rates of depression and other serious illnesses or diseases. So what is important here is that it's a 10-question screener, and each question, if they answer yes for some traumatic experience, they get a point. And so if you have individuals who scored a 4 or higher, which here in Center Grove, 35% of the enrolled clients that we have scored a 4 or higher, what that means is that the likelihood of them experiencing a serious life event, illness, or something of that sort is increasing significantly due to the fact that they simply have experienced 4 perceived traumatic experiences in their lifetime. The reason I bring that up is because it is important to recognize that the trauma is there, people are experiencing it, and we do need the supports. I want to highlight our Have Hope pathway. So the Have Hope pathway is an extra level of care for individuals who receive our services who also happen to rate as being at risk on the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. All of our clients receive the screener of the Columbia at every visit. So we're constantly assessing for suicide risk at each session with our clients. When someone is identified as at risk on the Have Hope pathway, we do identify a greater level of care, more supports, sort of like wrapping our arms around them. They are assigned an intensive care coordinator that will be providing additional support, checking in on them after hours in the evenings. So it is an extra support. And we've had 22 students here in Center Grove who have been identified to be on the pathway and receive that extra level of support. So the need is here for sure. This graph just highlights the payers in terms of the services that we have been providing for active clients. 39% of the clients that we are serving here in Center Grove schools have private insurance or commercial insurance, and therefore what we have been able to do is expand the service delivery to those individuals who have private insurance solely. We do have some that receive both, or some that have have insurance support through both Medicaid and commercial insurance, but strictly 39%. There are 39% of our clients who are receiving solely commercial insurance or have commercial insurance paying for their services. So I do want to highlight a little bit of a difference between those who are receiving commercial insurance and Medicaid, because commercial insurance clients can only receive clinic option therapy services, which means our schools are considered a clinic site, so they can receive services here in the school building. Medicaid provides an array, a menu of services for the students. Unfortunately, is a huge difference. When I talked about those life skills clinicians that the bachelor's prepared staff can only work with that Medicaid population. What happens is someone who has Medicaid receives a package of services that includes case management, skills development, which is coaching on any skill, as well as home-based and community-based therapy services. So as you can see, it does open up a lot more services for those individuals, but we don't want to diminish the need for services for those with commercial insurance, because it is just as important. This last slide just highlights the services that have been delivered by our staff beginning January 1st through June 30th of this year. So if you look at it, between the 6 therapists and the, actually not even the 6 therapists, because it was 4 therapists and 4 life skills clinicians who have been providing those services, they have provided over 100 family therapy services, and over 1,000 individual therapy services. You can see the array of services. Telehealth is still something that payers will support right now at this time. We're not sure how long moving forward telehealth will be supported, but we're going to continue to provide it as long as we can. But you can see the different types of services, including the individual family therapy, as well as skills training and development, which is that individual coaching, which can include pushing into the classroom to provide that support or pulling out and coaching the students one-on-one. So in summary, I just want to state that the problems are not going away, and we're happy to continue to provide those support. We really just want to be able to provide them at a greater rate, serving more individuals this coming year, and we're excited to hopefully, I know we're already bringing on more than we had last year, staff, but the plan is to, obviously, like I said, have one therapist per building as soon as possible.
Thank you. Great presentation. Does the board have any questions?
On the diagnostic slide, what's other?
So other could include any of those trauma-related disorders. I always say in school-based services, we serve every diagnosis you can imagine. But some of the primary ones that you would see that fall under the other might be oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder. We do serve those on the autism spectrum disorder as well, trauma-related disorders,
Okay.
adjustment disorder, to name a few. Absolutely.
You had all the others pretty well defined. I couldn't figure out what else was left, so.
This is more of a logistical situation. From personal experience of having a son that had autism with Asperger's, and Mom and I were pretty well versed in how to get through medical things as she was a doctor. It's a maze. So I'm wondering, are your people trained to help families get through that maze of paperwork and get to that source they need? Because it's so easy to throw your hands up and go, I can't do it.
Absolutely. So it is a maze, and as I'm bringing on more staff, I am providing that training, not myself. I'm bringing in people to provide that training for those staff, because you're absolutely right. The Medicaid waivers, Bureau of Developmental Disabilities, all of that is so critically important, and getting them connected to those resources as soon as possible, not when they turn 18, but.
Well, as you said, understanding insurance also,
Yes.
well, why isn't it covered? It is covered, yeah.
That has been definitely.
That is a huge help to families that otherwise would go.
My staff are happy to explain as much as they can, and when they have questions, they come to me because we want the families to know. We truly do. We want them to have an understanding of what services are provided, what services are available, what services are we not getting right now that we could have access to.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, board?
I have a question on the last slide, the individual skills training and the individual therapy piece. Are there limits to any of these therapies? And also too, can you talk a little bit about what the difference in those two areas?
Absolutely. So I'm going to answer the second question first, the difference between individual therapy and individual skills. Individual therapy is provided by the master's prepared therapist or the clinically licensed therapist, and that is anytime you are processing the thoughts and the feelings, linking the thoughts and behaviors and emotions together for the client. Skills training is strictly coaching them. It may be teaching them a skill, and when we say teaching them a skill, it could be communication skills, anger management skills, problem-solving communication skills, but it is teaching the skill and then ensuring that the skill is able to be replicated. So there may be some modeling and some practicing of the skill, and then praising for use of the skill in the appropriate ways. So that would be the easiest way for me to describe the difference between individual therapy and individual skills. I also want to add that individual therapy would be something that's done in a confidential one-on-one setting, whereas skills can be done in any setting. I mentioned earlier you can be pushing into the classroom and supporting them to stay focused and stay in their seat, stop tapping their foot or their pencil. It may look like them pulling out and teaching them the skill and then going into the classroom and ensuring that they're exhibiting that skill appropriately or practicing that skill appropriately. There could be in the hallway some opportunities for skills training. If you see a student maybe not keeping their hands to themselves, taking something from someone else, grabbing something off the wall. There's so many different opportunities for skills training and development that are staff have the opportunity to do. And then the other part of your question. Limit. So when it comes to the skills training and development, and I should say that any of those Medicaid rehab option services that I mentioned, there being a package of services that they have access to, I could get into all sorts of nitty gritty. But if someone has Medicaid as their payer, CANS is completed every 6 months. A CANS is a Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths Scale. And from that CANS, an algorithm spits out a level of need. That level of need identifies the amount of services that each client would receive for a 6-month period of time. So for example, a client with a level of need 3, which the majority of school-based clients tend to be a level of need 3, a client with a level of need 3 would be eligible for 150 hours of skills training and development over a 6-month period of time.
I guess the distinction you raised between the commercial and the Medicaid, we're talking about this kind of plethora of service that's out there for the Medicaid. What about the commercial? What happens to those kids? Are they thrown to their own insurance carriers to find that kind of coverage? I mean, what happens to those kids?
So I wish I could tell you that commercial insurance coverage is fantastic and offers this array of services just as Medicaid does. Unfortunately, clinic option therapy is what commercial insurance providers are willing to provide, to support. So clinic option therapy could include individual therapy, family therapy, and group therapy, but it would have to be in a clinic setting. Again, I mentioned those schools are considered a clinic setting, but it would not allow us to go to the home, for example, and provide home-based therapy.
So those are still provided within our program. It's just they don't have the broad array that the others have.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that's what we ran into on that one. I assume also you work very closely with our special needs department as far as IEPs, because that's a whole nother guidance.
Absolutely, and our staff are very well aware of the need to be maintaining regular communication with teachers of record and other individuals who are working with our clients so that we're aware of what goals are being worked on through their IEPs, how we can support them if there's a behavior plan in place, et cetera.
Okay. Mrs. Counts, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Just curious, so you've worked with other school districts, and what can you say, are we looking, when we look at our numbers, are we, what does it look like? What do we, I hate to say it, but how do we compare?
Can you clarify, are you talking about the number of students
Yeah,
needing
the need,
services?
The need, yeah.
I will say that if we were to compare the startup this past year in Center Grove to the startup in other districts, the referral rate here in Center Grove far exceeded the other districts that we have been in, recently starting up in. And I don't know if that's because I know that in some other districts that we've been in, they did have a previous school-based mental health provider. Some of them did not, so that might be one difference. But I will say the rate of referral, and right off the bat, was extremely high. It was consistent. We were regularly getting them, and we could not, what we ended up doing, honestly, because I had started out with one therapist, and therapists are the ones required to do the intakes to enroll new clients, we had to identify therapists in other districts to assist with enrolling the clients into our services, because my one therapist could not do all of the intakes and see the clients that then became enrolled in services. So it was definitely a higher rate of referral, and like I said, it broke my heart to say we had to put a pause on referrals back in April, but I just knew that we couldn't provide the quality care if we kept doing the intakes at the rate at which we had been.
Thank you.
And I don't want to blame it, but I could lean on pandemic for causing those high numbers at the beginning here. Let's hope that numbers go down. So if there's not any other questions, you have one more, Mr. Hubbard?
I got a few. First of all, I didn't catch your name.
Becky Mills.
Becky? Okay, thanks for coming, Becky. In one of your slides, you said life skills clinician, and then I saw some that said family skills clinician. What are those two roles?
They're the same. Family skills, it's the service provided. So there's a life skills clinician who can provide individual skills training and development or family skills training and development. Family skills training and development would look similar to individual skills training and development, but it would be providing that coaching for the family. Oftentimes what that looks like is coaching on behavior management plans in the home, setting limits, rules, structures, following through with things at the home. That's what that might look like.
And these are things you work with parents?
Absolutely.
Okay. You had a pie chart at the beginning too. Was all that data collected from was that data that the school collected or data that you guys collected?
Data that we've collected based on
Okay.
diagnoses in our electronic medical record.
Okay, and out of those 100, I think it was 122 cases or whatever it was, did you give any feedback to the school on what caused some of those, whether it be social media, whether it be bullying, or like what caused some of these issues that maybe we could address it at a school level to try to circumvent some of these things?
So that's a great question. We are in constant communication with the schools, and I will say that is something that it is an area of improvement because we only had, starting out, the 1, 2, and then 3 therapists throughout the year. Moving forward, I anticipate greater communication with the schools, and that could be with the school counselor, with the teacher of record, special education department, whoever is working with and collaborating, on behalf of that child, because we do want to make sure that we're talking about these on an individual basis about what are the referral concerns, where are these, issues stemming from, and it does take a little bit. At intake, you do gather a lot of information, but you don't get all of the information that explains everything. But with having a therapist moving forward, like I said, the goal of having one therapist in every building, the plan is for that therapist to have at least a monthly, if not weekly, meeting with the school to talk about the referrals, active clients, so that we're maintaining that regular communication. We were not there this year because we just frankly did not have the staff to be able to maintain that, those regular communications.
Okay, so when you guys come in and talk to students, or do you talk to the parents before you talk to the students?
So the intake process requires that the family is present. Family and client must be present for that intake assessment. Family engagement throughout services is something that we highly encourage and is critical to the success of our clients in our services. We look at it as though we cannot create lasting change if we are only working with one member of the family, one part of that system. We need to be working with the entire system in order to be able to create that lasting and sustained change, positive change for the youth that we're serving. So can we force that? No, but that is something that we really do strive for. It is when we do that intake assessment, at the intake assessment, ideally, that first family therapy session is scheduled so that we set that expectation right up front.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I would like to see data on whenever you do have hey, I see a social.
The reasons for, or the.
Like a social media issue going on at school, or there's a bullying issue, so maybe we can try to address it here and kind of try to bring that number down. Be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it would be nice for what are our directions we need to go.
Thank you.
If I see no other, thank you, board. Thank you for the presentation, very informative.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have anything else, Dr.
No,
Hoover?
Becky's just doing a great job, and I'm just waiting for the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shall we move on? Our next report is on social emotional learning. You want to do
Sure,
introductions?
yeah, thank you very much. So again, Dr. Hoover's up here today. She is accompanied by Christy Berger, who is our Director of School Counseling and Mental Health, and she works closely with community as well, as you just heard. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the both of them to share with you an update on our School Counseling Mental Health Department.
Thank you, Dr. Arkanoff and the school board. I want to just start by talking about just a little introduction. Meeting our student social emotional needs has been a critical component of helping students to reach their potential for well longer than since I've been in education. The adage, kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and that really comes to those relationship pieces and how our teachers and our school staff really just get to know kids, because it's those connections that often motivate and help us to strive to really become who we can be as young people. And I know we all had those teachers in our lives that really meant a lot to us. And we know those connections are important, and the affective needs and students' academic success are linked in so many ways. And the more needs a student has that aren't being met, and those run across all demographics, the more needs they have, the more that support they need so that we can help them get to the learning piece. And so we've been doing this for a long time as individual teachers in our counseling programs, and we really pair that with our academics. So our schools have worked to create the kinds of cultures and supports within them to meet the needs for all of our students so that we can meet our academic goals with every student. So I just want to share a timeline, and Dr. Arkanoff, you did a great job of teeing this up. In our Strategic Plan 2.0, this really came from our parents that said, we need some character education components to our schools. And they saw that there were some things happening in different schools, and it didn't have a centralized, this is what we do. And from that, we had a committee that included parents and teachers and administrators, and we landed where we have 10 traits that we think are things that kids should have to build good character. Those are all on our website. There's information about all of those and how we teach those in our buildings. And our counselors had worked on those since 2017 was the first year we implemented that, starting in August. So we've had those for 5 years in our district. Also in 2017, a group of counselors had formed a study group. There was a counseling grant available, and the study group, they were supposed to find, what are we missing? Where are we not serving students well enough to help them in their academic life? And through that study, we did not get the grant, we didn't do any of those things, but what we did learn is our students in our district overall have a very high level of anxiety and stress, which makes complete sense. We're a very high-achieving school district. Our kids go on to do amazing things, homes with very high expectations, teachers with incredibly high expectations for those students. And it's often good stress, right? Good stress is motivating. Too much stress is debilitating. And so we really wanted to work to help with students in those areas, those students that need it and have that identified need. And while we didn't get that grant, we did know that was something our counselors started working on in support of kids, especially as those kids came to those with them needs. So they tried to build their toolbox of support. In 2019, 3 different things happened, and one was the IDOE, the Department of Ed, released SEL competencies. And those were not mandated. They were just said, hey, we know some schools are suffering, and actually Ms. Berger is going to give some more information on that. And those were a reaction to some things happening around the state and in our nation. But they're not mandated, they're not required. That year, though, there was an Indiana code, a state-mandated legislative action that was schools needed to teach employability skills. And that was part of our move to college and career-ready standards. And so they understood, the state said, not only these academic things kids need to leave high school to be successful in what they know, but there's also some employability skills, some ways we need to behave that make us good, whether it's college students going into the military, getting a job, whatever those are. These are things, and that came from a big committee that included employers as well as educators, saying this is what young people coming to us don't have. So those are state mandated through Indiana law. And she's also going to talk about those a little bit later in the presentation. Later that year, we also had a referendum for safety and security in our district. And while that did not pass, there were some really important mental health things that we considered in that. About 30% of that referendum, had it passed, was going to be dedicated to things we could do for students' mental health and well-being. We could not do all of those things, but we've tried to do what we can with what we have. And we've added some supports in the counseling department, as well as some things we've done in safety and security throughout the district. in 2020, in that fall, or in February, right before we went on shutdown and couldn't be at school anymore, we had hired our first director of counseling and mental health, and she was instrumental in onboarding the community supports that Mrs. Mills just went through and all the support we've been able to give to students this year. And thank goodness, because this year was needs unlike any we've ever had with the pandemic and that effect it's had on students and adults. So she spent a lot of her time and energy making sure that program was getting off the ground and we were identifying kids and doing the things we needed to do. She also was instrumental in the administration of a survey called Panorama, and that was given to all students grades 3 through 12 in the fall and in the spring, and it had been, because no survey is given to students without school board consent. I know you had voted on that last year, and we had communicated with families before those surveys so that they know what those were about. We use that to help support, what are those needs with our students? Is anxiety still high? We knew it was high in 2017. Were students still struggling with that? And then we wanted to help support that in the ways that we could for those students that did have those needs. We had also, last year, started talking about what we could do for, they're called Tier 1 supports. What can we do to help every kid proactively to learn those employability skills, to learn those things that help us get along in the world. And we were able to adjust some things in our elementaries, and we're gonna offer some of those Tier 1 supports next year, which we'll explain later. And then the last, just June 1st of this year, we had a director change, and Ms. Berger came to us and just started just last month. And she's been helping to get particularly that elementary thing off the ground, connecting with our community health partner to make sure we're ready to start the year and have those things in place we need. So that's kind of been our journey. This isn't we've been traveling this. We knew the need, which was a great part of feeling like we needed that referendum to fast forward things more than we could have otherwise. So I wanted to just give that background and let Christy talk about our plans in the future.
Sure thing. Here. Thank you all for coming tonight. I am Christy Berger, and I am the Director of School Counseling and Mental Health here for Center Grove. A little bit of background about me. I am born and raised in Indianapolis. I went to Anderson University for college, got my bachelor's in social work there. Took a year, kind of tried to figure out what I wanted to do, did some case management down in Nashville, Tennessee, and decided to come back. My passion was really working with students in schools. And so when I was in Nashville, I got to see how school counselors and school social workers work with students, and so decided to come back to IUPUI to get my master's in social work. And then I started my career here in Center Grove Schools. I was at North Grove Elementary for about 6 years, serving there as their school social worker, and then was asked to come over to the middle school to be the middle school counselor, and I at that time went back to get my school counseling degree. So I actually have my master's in both social work and school counseling, which is helpful because that's the team I lead here in Center Grove. They have both of those backgrounds. And then about 3.5 years ago, I went to the Indiana Department of Education to work on what's called Title IV funding, which is federal funding that helps support whole child learning and teaching. And I was there for about 6 months. And within those 6 months, we had 2 school shootings in Indiana. And the superintendent at that time felt like we needed to hire somebody who had a mental health background who could really help schools as they come around and support the whole child so that we don't continue to have these crises in our schools. And so I was promoted at that time to Director of Social, Emotional, and Behavior Wellness. And then as Dr. Hoover said, I came back to Center Grove, excited to see a lot of familiar faces and families I worked with over the years, but I have been back since June 1st and have been working with my team and the team of administrators and teachers. So why whole child wellness? So why do schools have to do things around whole child wellness that don't include our academics? And so here are some national stats. At age 13, 20% of our students are diagnosed with a mental health disorder, and 5% of our students are diagnosed with a substance abuse disorder. A lot of times we know that those can go hand in hand. A student may be coping with a mental health concern by substance or maybe using substance, which may create a mental health concern. Students who struggle with their mental health tend to be absent a lot from school, and they are in that definition of chronic absenteeism, which means they're missing 10% of their academic day. Youth are 6 times more likely to receive school-based treatment, such as community, which is why it's been such an important path for Center Grove to take, to partner and to provide that school-based services, because our families are more likely to attend those services because they're at school. It helps to eliminate the barrier of transportation. Also, with parent schedules, it tends to be a bit more flexible so that they can do that at school. So in Indiana, so let's talk about some Indiana-specific stats. So this data was taken by the Indiana Youth Institute, and this was done pre-pandemic. And there are 2 stats here that I'll get to that are actually from 2015, because we have, as a state, have not had any current data since then. And so students claim, about 36.5% of our students have claimed that they have been cyberbullied, and this is one of the stats that I believe will increase due to being online 24/7 with the pandemic. I only could assume that this would be higher. And in Johnson County specifically, for every 1,149 youth and children that live here, we have 1 mental health professional for them. So that's when Becky was talking about our staff and the national shortage. And so that's why we're doing this work we're doing, is because we want to be proactive and preventative so that our students may not need that mental health support. About 26% of our high school students don't feel safe, and that doesn't mean just physically safe. That doesn't mean that they are afraid to come to school. It might mean once they're at school, they don't feel like they have a place to go if something was to happen. They might not feel emotionally safe, they may not feel mentally safe, and so 26%. And prior to COVID, 33% of our students 6th through 12th grade reported feeling sad or hopeless for 2 weeks in a row. And being a middle school counselor for the years that I was, this is something that I saw on a daily basis here in Center Grove. And the last 2 stats are the ones that I said are from 2015, and truly is where Mrs. Hoover was sharing about the counseling grant, and the funding that came from that was because of these stats. So Indiana, the second leading cause for our students dying that are 15 to 24 is suicide, the first being automobile accidents. And then Indiana ranks 2nd in the nation for students who have made suicide plans. And that data, to me alone, honestly, is what keeps me up at night, and is what I would say is our students are asking for our help, and they're crying out for some supports and some needs day in and day out. So let's look at Center Grove specific data. So prior to last year, there was not necessarily a formalized way that all schools were submitting their suicide assessment data. So this data is if a student comes to the school counselor, possibly a dean, assistant principal, and says that they're having thoughts of suicide. A parent could have called. It could have been a friend coming to report that. We go through the Columbia screener, and so you'll see last year alone, for elementary students, we did 106 of these. And for secondary schools, we did 137. 2 things to note. Our kids weren't in school every day at the secondary, so would this have been higher if they had been, or was school their safe place and it maybe wouldn't have been as high? Something to think about. And again, I spent 6 years at the elementary, and I can tell you that this number is extremely high from when I was there not too long ago. Dr. Hoover also shared that we did some Panorama data last year, and so this is the spring results for grades 3 through 5. And again, these are the students report this, and so it's electronic. And some of the questions that are asked on this, we focused on classroom effort, emotional regulation, and grit. And the type of questions that are asked is how hard do you work in class? Do you try to be a part of classroom discussions? What do you do when you're upset? Are you able to calm down? And then for grit, questions like if you're working towards a goal and you fail at that goal, do you try again? Or do you stop trying? And so when I first look at this and I look at the percentage, I'm like, that's not terrible, right? 76th percentile, 40th percentile. But that is, then we take it to our national norms, and you'll see, so 52% of our students say that they do well in grit, but compared nationally to their peers, we're in the 0 to 19th percentile. The same for emotional regulation, and then classroom effort, we are up higher above the norm in that space for our students 3 through 5th grade. And then if we look at our secondary students, you'll see a little bit of shift there. Classroom effort actually went down, so that's them saying they aren't trying as hard at school. And then emotion regulation went up a little bit for them, and grit is still down in that 0 to 19th percentile.
So what is social emotional learning at Center Grove? So here's the definition that we use. What I really want to point out about this, I'm not going to read everything to you, is that this is a process not only for children but also adults. This is something that we have to continue to practice. Day in and day out, I have to practice conflict resolution. Day in and day out, I have to practice public speaking, right? And my stress around that. So those are things that I have to practice day in and day out, and those are skills that we're teaching our students. And the employability standards that I'm going to get to here in a moment tie to all of the definition here that you'll see in the black boxes. So we're teaching the skills for our students to be able to understand and manage their emotions, which ties to the regulation piece of the Panorama Survey, set and achieve positive goals, establish and maintain positive relationships, feel and show empathy for others, and to make those responsible decisions. What is the benefit of this work? Well, I kind of laid the why, the foundation of why we do this. But again, as Dr. Hoover and Dr. Arkonoff shared, this is something we've been doing for a long time. It may have been under a different name. It may have been called soft skills, character education. But there's been a ton of research about this. And the research shows us that our students who receive daily social emotional learning skills practice and instruction, we will see an 11% gain on their academic scores. We will see an $11 return on investment to the community, which means what we're doing is we're seeing less of our juvenile students being arrested. We're seeing less medical bills. We're seeing less of public assistance and substance abuse. And so this really invests money back into the community. We know that social emotional learning has its greatest impact when we start with students in kindergarten and even really preschool. We're so fortunate to have that here, and we are really supporting those students right away. And then social emotional learning also has a positive impact on our teachers. They're teaching their students how to handle a tough situation. Maybe they're coming in that morning and they just got into an argument with their children or their husband and they're feeling frustrated, right? They can explain that, how they're working through that, because they're here to teach and to do their job just so we can get our students' brains ready to learn. So again, social emotional learning at Center Grove, we're focusing on skills that support college and career and life success. We're really helping to develop productive, responsible community members, as our community businesses and stakeholders have said they need to see this from our students when they come to their space. And again, really just being intentional to align to the vision of this district, which is to provide an exceptional educational experience for all the students that we serve here at Center Grove. Dr. Hoover talked a little bit about this, the tiered supports. And so tier 1 is something that all of our students receive. So in Center Grove, we talk about the conditions for learning. We know that if students come and they are hungry, or their pet passed away, or a grandparent is sick, and they come to school, they're not focused on learning, right? They're focused on what they came to us with. And so we want to have an opportunity to talk them through that and get them ready to learn. We want them to have access to their school counselor, their school social worker. A lot of our students participate in health and PE classes to really focus on that wellness aspect. And we have school-wide expectations for our students, and that is, again, a tier 1 support. And if we look at tier 2 and tier 3, some and few, you'll note that if your student is receiving any of those supports, it is parent permission. Just like Becky was sharing, she would not do an intake unless the parent was there. And as a counselor, sending her a referral, I have to have parent permission before I even send that contact information to community. So some of that tier 2 support might be a small group with the student service personnel, some one-on-one skill building, a mentor-mentee program. And then for about 5% of our students, they need some additional support. So that might be referring them to an outside agency like community, providing them a 504 plan or a special education plan to support their needs. So the new thing that is coming in August is the elementary special rotation. A lot of this has been highlighted, but I want to show that these are the 3 skills that we will be working on, and those are the employability skills. And that was shared several times, that was through Indiana Code, and I want to say it's Senate Enrolled Act, hold on, I wrote it down, 297. So that was in 2019 that came about. So Senate Enrolled Act 297 required that all schools K-12 provide employability skills to our students. What was also shared was that we will be posting all of those lessons on our website in 9-week increments. And so you will know what day your student will be receiving that, what will be taught. We will also provide a teacher extension, so if teachers want to support the lesson, or if parents want to support the lesson, we'll also have a parent resource there as well. And then, as was shared earlier, something new, starting June 1st going forward, is that all school social worker and school counseling lessons will be reviewed by the teaching and learning team. I'm not going to go into depth of all of these, but I just wanted you to be able to see here are the actual skills and standards that are required. And when we put up our lesson plans, we will tell you which skill we're teaching to so that you know what that student is receiving and how we're tying it into that specific employability skill. So you'll see the ones for regulation. Again, this is just K-5 special rotation, so I obviously didn't put up all K-12, but those are on the Department of Education's website. And then connection and collaboration. Think of collaboration, just really working well in teams, working well with one another. What happens if we have conflict? How do I work through that so that I can get my project done? And then ways to get involved. A lot of this has been said already, but the strategic planning that's coming, again, will provide that home to school connection. And then next Wednesday, we will be hosting a parent information session. And I believe yesterday, we've already started to see some responses come in. We sent a form for you to fill out for your questions so that we can make sure that every question is answered at that meeting next week. Any questions from the board?
Board members? One of you go first.
I have a few.
All right.
Okay, so when you said the lesson plan is going to be posted online, is that the lesson plan that specifically is going to be used, or are you posting more of a curriculum online?
No, we are creating that. We are creating our own curriculum. We did not buy a national curriculum. We wanted to make sure it was Center Grove specific to the students we serve. So the actual lesson plan will be posted. The resources we use, if we read a book, if we show a movie clip, all of that will be posted in addition to the standards it matches.
Okay. I got a few questions. So
No,
just
I'm
bear
ready.
with me, Christy. I do appreciate you being here and being transparent. I think that's real important to the community. So, especially with all the things around SEL right now, you I try to, we talked earlier in the week, and I did a lot of diving in online, and
Good.
I can find a lot of stuff that says how horrible it is, and I can find a lot of stuff that says how good it is. So, I kind of made a list of questions here to kind of separate facts from fiction for me.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Are you using school counselors to talk about SEL? Or are you going to do that yourself? And if you are going to use school counselors to work with you, because you referred to them as your team earlier, will parents be notified on what school counselor will be where and talking to which of their students?
Yeah, it's
prior to
actually
that?
already posted on the website, which SEL counselor will be. There's 3 of them, and they will be sharing 2 buildings, and they will be on every other week. So 1 week they're at North Grove, 1 week they're at Sugar Grove, and they go back and forth. Those 3 counselors have been in the district. I have been working with them this summer to create those lesson plans. I will be in there evaluating and hearing how they present the information to students. And again, those are the lesson plans that will be on the website. But in addition, for years, our school counselors and social workers have provided in-classroom lessons. So one of the reasons for that is if something happens with a student, they have a death of a family, their parents are going through divorce, they have somebody at school they can talk to if they want to, right? And so how students know who a safe adult is by that person coming into their classroom and teaching lessons. So every school, every elementary school will have that full-time person that they've had, and they will provide like an intro who I am. They're required to provide a bullying presentation to make sure that our policies and procedures are up to date with that, and those things will post as well.
So the same counselor will stay at the same school?
So the addition is there will be one person always at that same building, but then a half person will be, or a full person will be there every other week. So they have 1.5.
Okay.
But students will get SEL instruction in the special rotation twice a month by the SEL counselor that floats.
Okay. I know I asked Dr. Arkanoff this earlier
Sure.
about the CRT when he was talking about that, but do you see the overlap in between CRT and SEL? Do you personally see an overlap in those 2 things?
Sure, I would honestly agree with what Dr. Arkanoff said. In Center Grove, no. I do see, if you look at national organizations that are doing SEL work, they're using it in certain spaces. I could see how people could connect those 2. I see how they could connect the words that are being used to support that. But really, the social emotional learning that we are teaching here is what I shared on the screen. And really, those skills that our students need to lead to be successful, to deal with real life, to deal with conflict, to deal with stress, to deal with day-to-day things that come up. So in Center Grove, no, I do not see the connection. I do see how other people see it as a connection in other spaces, and especially in some national spaces.
Okay. How are you going to measure SEL here at Center Grove and it being successful? How are you going to measure that?
Great question. The Panorama Survey, that we shared that data, and again, that is an opt-in, opt-out, that survey. Last year, there was a form that went home. You had to turn it, the bottom part in if you did not want your child to participate. Same thing will happen again. It'll be fall and spring again this year, and you can always opt your child out. But that is the data that we will look at to see if those SEL lessons are making a difference, which is why we tied them to classroom effort, emotional regulation, and grit.
Okay. And I think you mentioned this earlier, but will parents have full access to all media, videos, pamphlets, anything that's presented to the child? They'll have access to that prior to that?
In 9-week increments, yes.
Okay.
So before, the first lesson will be August 9th. Our goal is to have that up 2 weeks before. So it'll come to, be on the website.
So what if a parent sees something that you're going to present to their child that they don't feel appropriate to be given to their child? Is there a contact person for them to reach out to?
Yes, we will actually have on the same page where those resources are, an input form that they can provide input that will come to me, and we'll discuss that. If their child is at school that day, they will receive that instruction. We don't allow our students to opt out of special areas. But that's why we're putting it on the website, so they'll know which day and what time their students will be receiving that.
Okay. And what would you consider like an appropriate time frame? Like if a parent reaches out to a point person,
Oh, sure.
would you try to have your team get back with them like within a day?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 24 hours
Okay.
at the latest.
Is this only going to be implemented twice a week, or is this going to be something that you would like to see implemented like into other courses, like
Sure.
English maybe, or things like that? Or is it just specifically to where, I guess what I'm asking is if a parent is concerned about SEL, is this where they need to focus on? Because or is this something that you see kind of being
Yep.
an English class, or maybe specific books they're asked to read or things like that?
So this is where they will receive explicit instruction. I believe that good teachers, day in and day out, talk with their students. They model things with their students. If there's a situation, they walk them through that. They share how to deal with conflict. That ties into social emotional learning. But explicit instruction, that 2 times a month at the elementary level of K-5, yes.
Okay, so in your opinion, I think I asked you this when we talked last time,
Yeah.
but in your opinion, do you think the parent should be asked for permission before anything is discussed with their kid, in mental health counseling or ed counseling in general in the schools?
So those are 2 separate things. So if you're talking mental health and counseling, yes, we need parent permission for that. In the school, when a student comes down and they're in a crisis, I don't always have the time to call the parent. It is best practice to always call the parent after I have had that interaction. Or a lot of times, honestly, I would just do it while I was with that student if I was a school counselor. The SEL instruction that we are teaching, that are employability skills, that are academic instruction, no, I don't believe that we need parent permission for that because it's in line with all the other academic standards that we teach.
Okay. Last question.
Yeah?
Our Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita, he wrote a thing called Parents' Rights, I think it was
Yes.
called. Have you read that? Have you
I
had a chance to
have.
read that?
I have.
In your opinion, from what you interpret from that, do you interpret that parents have the option to opt their children out of anything to do with SEL based on what he recommended as parents' rights, or not?
So I think it goes back to what I just said about it being what we are teaching in Center Grove. It is employability skills. It ties to regulation, connection, and collaboration. So no. I think in that document, when he spoke to SEL, I believe he even used Castle's SEL. That's not what we're doing in Center Grove. That is different. And so I think the way that he spoke to it was more general, and the way that I'm speaking to it is specific to our students in our community.
Okay, all right, I lied, I got one more question.
Oh,
So,
Joe, you're killing me.
would you be in favor if if there's, let's say we move forward with this and there's a lot of questions and concerns from the community, would you be opposed to having any kind of audio or visual equipment in the room so parents could kind of hear what's being told to their children, or would you not be opposed? Would you be opposed to that or not?
So we can't do that due to student rights. If you would like one of our team members to record a presentation that doesn't have interaction with students, yeah, we can post that.
So you're saying the parents can't see, they can't like live stream in or watch what's going on in the classroom?
No, because of student rights of those in the class. Right?
So,
This is a presentation, let's listen,
so
please.
I mean, is that, you mean like video-wise and audio or both? I'm just trying to educate myself.
No, that's fine, and I'm not gonna
No,
call
that's
out Jason Taylor, but I
If
think
you
for
don't know the
HR,
answer-
I
if
think
you
we
don't know
have
the-
to,
If you don't know the
yeah.
answer, that's fine.
I think for parent right, or for student rights, if a parent says they don't want their child to be photographed or a part of live stream, we cannot do that.
Okay.
Okay.
It's fine.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so anyway, I appreciate you doing that. And I really truly believe that every teacher here at Center Grove wants what's best for the kids here. I mean, I don't think they'd be teachers if they
Right.
didn't. But the concern I have is what a teacher feels what's best might not be what a parent feels what's best. And I really think that line, I just really want that line defined because I would hate for a teacher to ever infringe on what somebody's family standards might be, you know what I mean?
I agree.
And I hope you agree with that. And, you know, I'm a firm believer in it. It's a school's job to educate a child, and it's a parent's job to raise a child.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that line. Thanks.
Mr. Hubbard, are you, any other
I'm done.
questions? Thank you. Next, Mr. Alexander, did you have questions?
Yeah, so in terms of the opt-out and
Could
opt-in.
we listen, please?
In terms of the opt-out and opt-in, do they do it before each 9-week presentation? So like if the first 9 weeks, the parents are like, yep, I'm good with that. And then the next 9 weeks are like, I'm not so sure I like that. So is it all or nothing?
The curriculum is not opt-in and opt-out. Like our art classes or our music classes, which are also state standards. And those are actually recommended classes. These are supposed to be, they're mandated for us to teach. So the Panorama Survey is what families do not have to have their students take. And we did have some families last year that did not want their child to do that. And so that they can opt out. I think what she was talking about before, families would know when the lessons would be for their child's class. And families always have the option of not having their child at class during that time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Daniels?
I have no questions at this time.
Thank you.
Mrs.
Mrs.
Counts.
Counts, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Counts. Dr. Arkanoff? No, go ahead.
Oh, wait, we still have, thanks, Chris.
We still have some questions. Don't be sneaking away.
Dr. Arkanoff has a couple questions.
All right.
More just some clarifying things too. I know because I've been asked this and I'll make sure I said the right thing. But that Panorama survey that we do, that's anonymous, correct?
No, that
No.
is not anonymous. However, that data is not shared widely.
Okay.
That data is, currently I have access to that. A parent could call and ask for the access of their child's response.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
okay, good to know because I wasn't sure. So, okay. And then Senate Enrollment Act, was it Senate Enrollment Act 297, correct?
That's what I believe I read
Yeah,
down, yes.
yeah, it's okay. I just
Okay.
wanted. So, in that act there, we talked about the employability skills. And I liked your slide number 13, slide 13, where you talked about connection, regulation, and collaboration. And I know in talking with a lot of employers, this is part of my responsibility out there, is that these are three of the major areas of concern in employing. You know, a lot of people hire folks that are really good at their job, but they can't collaborate or they can't self-regulate, and they have trouble connecting. And so hence the need for this work to be done within schools, and hence the law set forth by our legislators. I just wanted to kind of just touch base on that and see if you had any other thoughts around that, as you've had the experience of working around the state and, you know, districts trying to work towards this, in particularly these three areas. Is this, what are you seeing around, what did you see around the state as districts were working to implement this type of work?
Sure. I would say majority of the districts I saw, teachers I spoke with, students I talked to, regulation is the number one concern. Our young people are really struggling with managing their emotions. That might be outbursts, that might be internal, self-harm, those types of things. And so I would say for the majority of the districts, they're really leaning into the regulation, they're really leaning into that support, and especially after coming off of a pandemic, providing that not even just for our students, but also for the educators and the staff. And then collaboration, always working together in teams. I think we've all been in school, we did group projects, and some people love that and some people hate that, but that's life. We have to do group projects, and we have to know what to do if one person isn't pulling their weight or one person's being a little too bossy. And so that's a skill that we have to teach our kids. And so I would say that to me is just teaching. That's interacting with kids, that's them being in a classroom, that's them going to a school. And then connection, I think, is, again, goes back to the fact that you and I might not agree, you and I might not have the same belief, but we're in the same space, and so we need to work to get along while we're in that same space. And so I think that these three skills, honestly, from kindergarten to seniors, we are seeing the need for these skills for our students to be successful day in and day out at school, but also when they leave our space. That's our responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And I know as you've been working through this, and we've talked about this before, that these three issues, we see that in just our own employment. And we have conversations about how do we get people to work together. You know, a lot of times people are not dismissed because they're not good at their job. It's a lot of times because they can't get along with one another. And
Right.
so we definitely need these skills worked on. So thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. did
I actually have a
great
follow-up
job.
question to that, if you would.
Yeah.
Because I see the connection, regulation, collaboration up there. And I don't think there's anybody that would say that those are not three important skills for not only, as Dr. Arkanoff said, children, but for adults.
Correct.
So with teaching connection, regulation, and collaboration, how do we measure success? How do we then say this is having a positive impact? Or how do we measure failure? How do we say it's not working? I mean, what do we look at? What metrics?
I think in the moment, again, we'll look at that Panorama data, we'll look at office referrals, discipline referrals, we'll look at attendance. If kids don't feel connected at school, they're not coming to school. So can we see that? Can we see how that works out? And then our ultimate goal would be, right, in 5 to 10 years that our business owners in Center Grove are saying, we're seeing a difference in your kids who are coming out ready to either work, go to college, or to be in the service. And so I think that's the long-term goal. But in the right now, we're going to look at attendance, discipline, and the Panorama data.
And I know we've, at least since I've been on the board, it's my second term, we've talked about educating the entire child.
Yep.
About how you learn in the classroom. You
Right.
learn at show choir, you learn at band, you learn at robotics, you learn in the athletic field, you learn all these different places. So do you see connection, regulation, and collaboration as part of that whole package?
Yes. Yeah, I believe that, again, that these skills are good teaching. What we're doing is, because we've been seeing a deficit, we're doing explicit instruction to make sure that all students are receiving that twice a month, to make sure that we are building those skills. But I believe all the great teachers I know do this day in and day out when kids walk in a building.
Appreciate that, thanks.
Anything else? Great questions, great presentation as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is public comments. We do have 4 people speaking. Before we do get to that process, I would ask you to listen intently to what I need to read here. Persons desiring to address the board concerning a scheduled public agenda item must register before the start of the meeting. Registration will close 5 minutes before the scheduled start of the meeting. Each person's statement may not exceed 3 minutes. If several people have indicated their desire to speak, the time limit may be reduced in order to allow more people the opportunity to speak. No more than 15 minutes will be allotted for public participation this evening. I also need to add to this that during your speaking time, it is not acceptable to have a derogatory remark of any participant of report this evening or towards a board member or another community member. Let's have respect for one another. This evening, we only have 4 speakers, so we will be able to allot 3 minutes to each one. When you come up, you'll give your name and your full address, please. Our first speaker this evening, are there any questions? Our first speaker, yes?
Are you gonna allow people to, like we talked about earlier, speak on behalf of a group, like one person can speak for 4 or 5 people?
We only have 4 speakers, so we have plenty of time.
That's what Dr. Arcroft told them they could do.
Yeah.
Explain that again?
Yeah, we only have 4 speakers.
We
so
only have 4
we don't have
speakers.
to-
We don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
They each are going to get their full time.
I think there are several people here who are hoping to express a response to exactly items on tonight's agenda.
This is a public speaking situation where you're allowed to come up in a board meeting that is being held in public. You're allowed to give your information and your ideas and your thoughts. If we as a board want to ask you a question, and there may be some go back and forth, we may have that. It is not for the community to start questioning during that time frame. I think
Mr. Russell, do we know what topics the 4 people have signed up to speak on? Is that
all 3 are CRT and SEL.
all 3 of them?
All 4, I'm sorry, all 4.
Okay. So no one's here to speak on the COVID issue? Everybody's
No
here
one is here on COVID, no.
Okay. Just checking.
We all know we can speak on COVID tonight, and it will be different tomorrow.
And just a point of clarification on it, the policy.
COVID.
Just a point of clarification for the board's policy, per the board's policy, you had to have signed up here. You were supposed to put your address down, no one did, and we need you to state your address because of that. That's really important, as that's part of showing that you're part of the community here. So that's why Mr. Russell's asked that you state your address since it's not there. We have 4 individuals that have signed up, and so that would consume 12 minutes of time of the 15. My guess is that if you can't get it done within the 3 minutes, he's going to probably give you a little bit of leadway since we have a total of 15-minute time limit. We don't know everyone's viewpoint that signed up. They may be the same, they may be different. So that's why the process is like that. If you were hoping to speak but didn't sign up, that's unfortunate because per the policy, we have that ahead of time, and that was out there. Again, if you're hoping to speak more, we will have the parent information meeting next week. So, but with that, I'll just turn it back over. So.
Thank you, Dr. Arkanoff. So this evening,
I want to comment back on that. I wouldn't circle back around that because Rich did ask this group specifically, it would be best if you guys talked together as one person for the, he explained it in the 15-minute time. He told them that instead of having 5 or 6 of you guys get up here and talk and say maybe the same things, maybe it's best if you all collaborate with one person, designate one spokesperson, and they could eat up the whole amount of time that we've already talked enough that they could already said what they have to say.
well, yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I guess what I'm saying is I'm assuming whoever the spokesperson is, I don't know who it is, they probably put their name down as one person, assuming that that's what was being told to them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
But nothing has come to us or been explained to us ahead of time that they themselves have worked that out amongst themselves.
But your superintendent told them to do that.
You have to tell us the directions so we can respond to you with appropriate.
Well, the directions are part of the policy that is public knowledge.
We're going based on what Dr.
Arcanoff told us at our meeting.
When we stepped involved, we had an extensive conversation with Dr. Arcanoff, which was fortunate, and Joe Hubbard, that was fortunate. And based
Yeah.
on
So
that,
who is the speaker for
So
the
who
group?
is
Who's
the
the speaker
speaker?
for the group?
I can handle this.
we have multiple people who want to speak in response to items on the agenda. These 2 women and parents want to speak in response to specifically to CRT and SEL, but I'm sure there are others, people that I don't even know maybe, that also want to speak.
Right.
This has been board policy and practice for years that you sign up when you come to the meeting here. That is on our website, and it's what we have followed. then you will be able to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're signed up, you'll
If
be
you're
able.
signed up, you will have time to speak tonight because we allow 15 minutes. There are only 4 of you, making it 12, give or take, minutes. So all 4 of you will get a chance to speak tonight.
And you believe this is in the best interest of transparency and trust?
I'm being transparent from the standpoint, this is the practice we have done. I'm not changing it from any past practice. I was not at that meeting, so no, I do not know what transpired at that particular meeting.
You on one hand, you say you want people to be here, but now you're saying you don't want them to be here and speak out.
But we can't.
Let's also, your meeting next Wednesday is really going to be a good time for you
Not
to,
really an open session either.
yes, it is, it's
No,
open.
it's not. It's a free screen, send in your questions. They'll get some contrived answer for it and then, have that answer.
And 4 weeks ago, at this board meeting, we were told that we could come, ask every question we had, and the staff
Tonight.
that was appropriate to answer would answer. 4 weeks ago tonight, that
Well,
was.
why don't we go ahead and start? We'll go ahead and start with the people on the list.
We're going to start with the people on the list and follow the procedure we normally follow. Let's see where we go. Our first speaker is Angela Elliott, please.
You want me to put that up there so they can fill it out themselves?
Right at the
If
podium.
you come to the speaker, please. Yeah. If you would state your name again and address.
Sure. So my name's Angela Elliott, and my address is 421 Governor's Lane, Greenwood, Indiana, 46142. I'm a parent and a community member. I came tonight because of the topics that were on the agenda and the concerns I have about a lot of the misinformation I've heard going around. And so I really appreciate, so I didn't know exactly what I would say when I came up here because I came to hear what was being said on the agenda. And I want to use my time to say that I really appreciate the detail that was given, that the position of Center Grove on critical race theory and that Dr. Arkanoff gave was very helpful to just have it out there to say this is what we believe it is and this is how it is or is not being implemented in our school district. So I really appreciate that. And then the SEL was the other thing that I've heard a lot of misinformation going on about and how it is being applied within our schools. And so I came to hear that as well. And again, I was not disappointed. I thought that the explanations that were provided were very helpful. And my request in my time up here would be that we continue to provide more opportunities for parents and community members to have the information and specific examples of how these theories and concepts are being applied at our schools with our kids and giving us real examples. So I think there's lots of generalities that are thrown around out in hyperspace. And it would be really helpful, I think, to calm some of the concern if we had real teachers sharing real examples from real curriculum that happens in our classrooms. And so that is I will leave this with, that is my request to the board, is that, as you mentioned, you're having one coming up that answers my question as a start. But I would say it's just a start. This is a big topic nationally, and we need to focus locally to combat any misinformation and make sure we're all staying on the same page for our kids. So that would be my request. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
I'll go on, Angela. Thank you very much for taking the time to come up and talk to us. I'd like what you said about the real teachers kind of giving real stories. Is that something you would like to hear like at a board meeting or like, how would you like to hear like you talk about like a success story from a teacher? Is that what you're talking about? When you say you
Not
want to hear a real
necessarily
story?
success stories. I'm just talking about like real examples of how SEL is provided in the classroom and how it not only in the explicit instruction, but when we do group projects, how does that connect and how is that an example of SEL being implemented in our classrooms?
Whether it be good or bad?
I think we'd have to hear the example.
Yeah, that's what I'm
before
saying.
can
Do you want to hear an
determine.
example whether it's good or bad? It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Okay,
not
okay.
just success. I don't
Yeah.
want to hear the glossed over.
Sure.
I want to hear the truth. And
Yeah.
I want us to focus on real life and what's really happening with our kids and not generalities and, inflammatory
Rainbows and
language.
butterflies, you want the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I want real life. I want to hear, I'm concerned about my kids.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Angela? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Amanda Ennis. You state your name and address.
Amanda Ennis, 1209 Millstone Drive, Greenwood, and I'm a parent and community member. I'm going to make this easy on myself and just read. I want to say I strongly support addressing the inequipping students in reference to social and emotional health. I'm saddened that the state SEL curriculum, which has embedded links to CASEL, which has been brought up so many times tonight, does little to meaningfully address social and emotional health, which is needed now more than ever. I know Dr. Arkanoff says the school teachings will not be influenced by organizations like CASEL, but the state's lessons are. In its current form, this CASEL teaching has hijacked true social and emotional learning and aims to divide students and promote causes such as systemic racism, equity, and social justice. A quick search on this CASEL website, just one search, led me to articles and teacher trainings on topics such as how to be an anti-racist teacher and student, how to be a social justice warrior, and how to teach that Black Lives Matter. And while Black lives certainly do matter, if we're teaching our students anything other than the truth that all lives matter, we are failing them. This website has articles from the author Robin DiAngelo. The district is familiar with her as she's contributed to books that I know the leadership staff has read, and her works are featured on the district website, or at least they were. It teaches that all white people are basically white supremacists. That would mean that we're all here white supremacists, and we know that this is not true. This is racism in reverse. Teaching these ideas will cause social and emotional damage, not healing. Transformative SEL and CRT go hand in hand, and they teach that racism is everywhere and everyone is guilty. These ideas hold contrary to the real civil rights heroes of our time, like Martin Luther King Jr. and Frederick Douglass. These brave individuals never promoted hate and division, so I ask the administration to address SEL independent of the state curriculum. You say this is what Center Grove is doing, and I look forward to being able to see this in a transparent way. I've been told that as long as the state standards are addressed, any curriculum would suffice. I'm glad you welcome parent involvement in this area, and so I'm not just going to gripe. I would love to help. I would also like to know if there's a plan if a teacher or counselor goes rogue and decides to inject race or division into their teaching, if they decide to teach CRT or transformative SEL instead of board-approved curriculum. I think the district, I know I was at a meeting where one of the board members said, if that's going on, let me know. Well, I think that there probably needs a better way than just emailing one board member. Lastly, just related to what I saw tonight, when I read under connection, cultural sensitivity, and social awareness, these are big, broad terms, and I expect as a parent that individual educator beliefs won't try to make kids believe that unless you think, believe, and act a certain way, you are not socially aware or you're not culturally sensitive. And that's a big concern of mine with this. Thank you.
Real quick, did you have any questions for Amanda, board?
I'm sorry, I didn't get her address.
1209 Millstone Drive.
What was the drive?
Millstone,
Millstone, thank you.
and
Send
your
you a
name is
Christmas
already on the
card.
list for strategic planning?
Thank you, Amanda, I appreciate it.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Teresa West. All the way up. If you would state your name and your address, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Teresa West, and I live between Arnie's and Target, basically. So 1075 South State Road 135, and I'm not exaggerating. Easy to find. I'm going to speak from my own experiences because I have retired now. 39 years of teaching, 36 and a half, thank you. 36 and a half of it at Center Grove. I'm a Center Grove graduate. Gosh, it's the whole gamut. I bleed red and blue, or red and white, I think, right now. But I've gotten the chance to see it evolve. And you know, and some changes have been good, some not so good, some great, some wonderful. And all along the way, and a lot of these people sitting here and in the back, I've never been shy about what I didn't like or what I totally approved of. But I always gave reasons why. And one of the things for SEL for me, and I think the misunderstanding perhaps, and I think what Angela said of talking or listening to actual teachers that work with it, it's not a moment where we just say, okay, everybody, we're going to have an SEL moment. For instance, when you develop a classroom and you develop your rules, you come up with what you want your classroom atmosphere to be. And most times I learned with my age, a little wisdom came along, I let the kids, and it was mostly fifth graders that I had, they came up with the rules with me. They had ownership. And so with the kids, they would come up with things that they thought we should stick with. And you'd be surprised at some of the kids that were maybe the biggest talkers don't talk when somebody else is talking. And it's like bonus package because they got the connection and their part in it. That's an SEL thing. You know, when we worked on a project for reading, I forget who said this now, but anyway, one of the ways that I would bring the kids and let them have involvement is a group project. They all have their parts, and you know how group projects are. Sometimes everybody doesn't do their equal share. Adults are the same way. But what they were able to do then is evaluate their own involvement privately with me, but then they were able to fill out a sheet and tell what they thought, how the group did together. Now, the rule was they could not be rude. They could not just say, oh, I don't like him, he didn't, you know. Couldn't be any of that. They had to give a reason what they didn't like or how they thought it could have gone better. That's an SEL moment. You know, we had kids, Christy did such a wonderful job, I just totally threw out my notes because I don't have to use them anymore. But I had a little boy walk in when we were doing I-step testing. 30 seconds. Okay, he literally came up to me and said, he was crying, he says, I watched my puppy get hit as I was waiting for the bus. His classmates got involved. That's an SEL moment. So all these things are things I think if you're parents, I'm a parent, that's what you want your kids to do. You want them to be a productive citizen. You want them to see how they fit into the whole thing. You want them to have ownership on what their part in it is. You want them to grow academically, socially, responsibility-wise, accountability-wise. It's all enveloping. So just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Teresa. Okay, we're going to work with a little.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You may be seated.
Did you see the teacher look you just got?
I know.
Not your first time.
We grew up. She's given me that look many years. Okay, we're going to have an SEL moment here of collaboration. Since there seems to be some confusion, we have discussed that we have one more speaker with your 3 minutes. I'll put that into who would you like that to be?
What is the fourth name that signed up tonight, please?
Yeah, there's
Oh, I'm sorry.
one and three.
Good. So I wanted to tell you that our fourth person coming up is John Jacob, if you'll come on up to the podium at the moment. But I did want to have you have time to talk amongst yourselves and figure out who you would like to come up and have another 3 minutes. If you'll state your name and address, please.
I will state my name. My name is John Jacob. I'm state representative for House District 93. If you don't mind, I will not, I'm because of my address, I have a lot of threats been getting at me, so I would rather not make my address public. Okay, well, again.
Mr. Jacob, why don't you give us your office address?
I'm sorry?
Your office address, not your home.
It is the State House, Indiana State House, 300 West Washington.
Okay, we got an address.
All right, okay. So I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I had a lot of notes actually to talk about SEL and CRT. However, given that it was discussed that CRT was not going to be implemented in Center Grove, and also it's been discussed that SEL, as it's going to be implemented in Center Grove, is not going to be traditional SEL as it has been taught across the country. However, I am grossly concerned that SEL and CRT are just inextricably tied. There is a lot of ambiguous and subjective information and ideology that is in both that weaves back and forth. So I am a little bit concerned about the information that was given tonight because I feel like it was very vague and it was very ambiguous. I do believe that SEL and CRT, as it presently stands in its present form being taught across the nation, I believe it definitively pushes a Marxist ideology that definitely undermines the very fabric of our nation. And that is greatly concerning to me, and I believe it's very concerning to the people here. In addition, it's been talked about, I noticed over and over, the state mandated employability skills. And you reference, I believe it was Senate Bill 297, I believe, from 2019. So I am more concerned about what exactly are the details of those state mandated employability skills. I would be very interested in the explicit detail that's being plumbed out with that. In addition, I worked for State Board of Accounts for almost 30 years as an officer of the court. Everything I did as an auditor for the State Board of Accounts with the issue of government was the issue of transparency. Everything that government does should be transparent. And I understand that there's issues of concern with children and their privacy. However, I think there's always a way to do things. And I think that the issue of video in the classroom and keeping our teachers accountable, I think is an incredibly important issue. I think teachers need to be accountable as to what they are speaking and teaching in the classroom. Not what they're going to say that they said that they taught, but that people can go back and look at the video footage. And also that if necessary, to make sure that students are not in those videos. You don't have to video the students, but discussion. Okay, so. Again, I think that the bottom line is I took an oath to uphold the Indiana Constitution and the state constitution, and also the laws of the state of Indiana. You also took that oath, and what I'm asking is that you respectfully uphold your constitutional oath, and anything that undermines or conflicts with that as it relates to anything within SEL or CRT, that you make sure that information, that is not implemented. Thank you.
Mr. Jacob, we have some questions, please.
My apologies. Any questions?
Questions from the board, please?
Well, one thing I was going to share with you, Mr. Jacob, thank you so much for being here, by the way.
Thank you.
You know, and thank you for serving the state and our constituents. You know, one of the things you asked about the employability skills, if you reach out to the Department of Education and it's Jason Callahan, you can see that guide that was put together. So I know that's one of your questions that you'd asked. And I know some of the board members might have some questions for you, but would it be okay if I asked you some questions since I have you here and I don't always I love to get the chance to talk to representatives. So,
I will try to do my best.
Okay. I guess my first thing is, and I'm going to get on my soapbox because I've done it my entire career. But I'd like to know where you stand on state assessments, standardized assessments, and the millions of dollars that are being put into them.
I am greatly concerned over the issue of state assessments. I am a big believer in the control of the local school boards. And I believe that our schools have greatly deviated from education. In other words, reading, writing, arithmetic, and we have. I'm greatly concerned that we have overlapped and I'm just using that as an example here tonight. SEL, mental behavior, the physical well-being of our children. I am all for, my wife and I have 6 children. I'm very concerned about our children. And I believe that many of the parents here, I can tell, but just because they're here, that they're concerned about that. But I think there's so much that the school teaches that is outside of the scope of what I think education really should be teaching.
Okay. And so in regards to that, so like the state assessment piece, and I can't remember what the crazy number was spent on, just standardized testing, right? Like iStep or iLearn or all those things. That's really my question is, so as we work as a school district and we put so much resources into that because that's how we're judged, that's how we receive our funding and so forth, I'm just curious as to, has there been talk at the legislative level about just really that large waste of money that continues year after year of all these different assessments and quite frankly creates a lot of stress, not just for our students and, but our teachers. And I wonder, if there's been some conversation. That's been my biggest soapbox as a superintendent. I have personally watched this never really work. And every couple of years, the legislators say, okay, we're going to throw that test out and we're going to spend millions of more dollars again. And you know what we could have done with all those millions of dollars? How many teachers we could have put in classrooms, how much more we could pay our teachers. And I just wonder if anyone's really having that conversation there.
In all honesty, I'm a freshman legislator,
Yeah.
but there was no, as far as I know, there was no discussion of that this
Okay.
past legislative session.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. I hope I'm not, I feel, I don't want to put you on the spot, so I
You're
know
okay, and if you have further questions, I would be
Yeah.
open to a meeting, and if you would like to further
Yeah.
discuss things, I'm open to that.
Yeah, absolutely, I would, I
Okay.
would, because I think, and I've been telling this to people, I'm not afraid to say it, but standardized testing is just wasting our taxpayer dollars.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arkanoff. Board members? Mr. Hubbard?
Hey, John. So I take it you're on the fence with CRT and SEL. I know there's some other people at the State House that are as well, and I'm rumored to, and well, it's not rumored, I've talked to Michelle Davis, and I know that she's kind of writing a bill. Do you know where that stands? Like, last I heard, it was kind of in the attorney's hands. Like, do you think that'll go through? Do you think that'll get passed where we ban SEL?
As far as legislation?
Yes. You were talking on it? I mean, if you can't
Joe, I
comment on it.
think you know where I stand with, I'm going to be actually very polite, I think, and I will be limited on my comments regarding the GOP in the state of Indiana. We have a Republican supermajority, and primarily they typically fail in standing for the Republican platform.
Fair enough.
I think, and as it relates to CRT specifically, I think it's an issue that we need to protect our children, our nation, and I don't see the Republican Party doing those things, and it's really angering to me. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Alexander?
Actually, Mr. Hubbard covered my question.
Oh, hell, thank you. Mr. Daniels?
I just have a question. We talk about the state funding formula for schools. You familiar with the algorithm that goes in and determines?
I have reviewed it when I worked for the State Board of Accounts, but honestly, it was years ago that I did.
And you
Can you
don't.
tell us what the algorithm actually is?
And the reason I ask is.
It made my mind spin when I reviewed it, honestly.
And the reason I ask is because Center Grove is almost always at the bottom of per pupil. You know, how much money we get for each kid in order to educate. Is there any discussion all at the State House to take another look at that algorithm for some more fairness and clarity among the schools as to what each gets with respect to the state funding formula?
I'm sorry, is your question, has there been a discussion, or would there be a discussion? Or could there be
Either
a discussion?
one. Pick one.
Number one, I mean, I do not know if there has been a discussion. I did not hear of any again in this last legislative session. I know there was much discussion about education.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, the GOP was pretty infuriated, I think, by a lot of the teachers' unions. They felt like they gave them the world, and I'm not directing that at Center Grove, and they felt like they just kept on asking and asking and asking, and they kept on giving and giving and giving. But as it relates to your question, specifically going forward, I would entertain discussion, and I'd be willing to take in information and take back to the GOP things that you want to discuss with me.
And just so you're clear on what I'm going for, I'm not talking about increasing the amount in the pot. I'm talking about how that pot's divided.
Right. You're
So,
talking about
two different
the
issues.
actual distribution.
The distribution
Yes.
among schools.
Right.
Now, there's the other issue too of, increasing the pot, and then everybody has more. So I think it's for further discussion. I was just curious as to what your position was on both of those. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to understand.
Again, I would be open to a discussion about
Okay.
that, a
Thank
further
you.
discussion outside of here if you'd like.
Appreciate
And
it.
I can give you my contact information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just for reference for everybody, there's 289 school districts in the state, roughly 289 schools. I'm looking at Dr. Gabriel back there.
297.
297?
I believe that's correct.
290?
Consolidation. Almost 300.
And typically, Center Grove has been anywhere from 270 to 275 in the funding formula over the
Thank
last
you.
10 years.
Who's on? One other question. Are you familiar with the Work Ethic Certificate Program?
I'm sorry, the what?
Work Ethic Certificate Program.
I am not.
It's the governor's Work Ethic Certificate Program.
Okay.
And part of that program goes hand in hand with teaching students skills, especially ones graduating right out of high school, on how to interview for a job, what you need. I mean, one of the criteria is simply showing up on time for things, because unfortunately, students don't have those skills coming from some of our homes. So I just wondered, if you're not familiar with it, I guess that won't really answer the questions, because those skills we're teaching in that from the governor go hand in hand with social emotional learning skills. So I didn't know if you were familiar with that or not.
I was not, sorry.
Okay, thank you. It's a great program. Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. Jacob, Congressman Jacob?
I think she's dropped.
Have we lost
her?
her?
Phone was dying.
So unfortunately, we have lost Mrs. Counts. Any other questions? Just connection.
Thank you.
We're trying to get her back.
I'm here.
Yay! She has listened. So, yeah. Yeah. Mrs. Counts, did you have any questions?
I do not. I'm sorry. Sometimes I can't. I try to hit the unmute button and it just keeps going up and down, so I apologize.
That's
The
okay.
joys of Zoom.
And we're having bad weather here, so that's probably not helping things. Okay. So have we come up with one more speaker?
Yes, Dr. Giuliani will speak for us.
Okay. And as always, if you state your name and address.
Hi, Kathy Giuliani, 5875 North Road 400 West. And I am a grandparent in Center Grove, and I am a parent of 2 children who came through the Center Grove schools. So we've been here for a good long time and have been very happy with Center Grove schools. We've had to punt tonight because we had a presentation we had timed it out for 15 minutes. Obviously, we got confused on that, so I'm going to just try to paraphrase what we wanted to get across. The reason this group formed was because of outrage over what happened at Pleasant Grove when the counselor went in and did the lesson called Windows and Doors. And just so you know, I just want to read one question from that. It was about teaching the kids about microaggression. These are fifth graders, I believe, right? Fifth graders, okay. So a microaggression might be all lives matter. So that's a microaggression because no one denies that that's true, but all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. Another one, if you didn't commit the crime, then the police wouldn't have to draw their guns. So that, of course, is assuming that they are guilty. So here's the point. In this one brief statement, you've taught the kids the inappropriate and harmful concept of microaggression. You've promoted Black Lives Matter. You've disparaged the police. You've effectively called the children racist without any thought, word, or action to support it. Well done. And we had a 10-year-old go home. How many other 10-year-olds went home and were upset but didn't have a parent that called? So that's what got this group going. So, and that's one of my main complaints. These programs, what I'm seeing written, are not at all age appropriate. And I have taught third grade through university. This is not your traditional character education. I would say your traditional character education is like what I used to teach in health class. Great stuff. And what's going to happen after the employability skills are taught? That's what we've been told. Those sound great, right? But what's after that? Also, we don't know what the plan is for middle school and high school. If you want to know where these lesson plans are coming from, they are coming from our Indiana Department of Education through a group called CASEL based out of Chicago. You should go look at their website. I want to read you one quote. The funders and growth partners for CASEL includes an organization called New Profit. Their mission is to seek and disrupt systems of oppression that are the foundation of an equitable opportunity and outcomes for all. And the Novo Foundation, they are a social justice foundation dedicated to catalyzing a transformation in global society from a culture of domination to one of equality. Is this the best way that we can spend 45 minutes every other week with our kids? Are our test scores that high that we can spend the time doing this?
30 seconds.
We're not unsympathetic to the suicide issue or to other mental health issues, definitely not, but we're taking a sledgehammer to fix a problem that a tackhammer could do. And I want to say one thing about the research that you're putting up telling us that this results in academic growth of 11%. I read the research. What I found was in the meta-analysis, only 16% of all of the studies in the meta-analysis even reported on academic gains, 16%. So I'm going to tell you that 11% is not only statistically weak, it's also deceptive.
Thank you. Mrs. Giuliani, do we have any questions for Mrs. Giuliani?
Sorry.
Anyone? Okay,
I
thank
do.
you. Did you?
Yeah, well, not really a question, just Kathy, I appreciate you coming in and taking the time to do that and representing these people, these fine young folks here. You know, you brought up that presentation, and I was pretty upset with it as well. I mean, I was actually really upset, and I don't think you'd find a person on this board that was happy with it, to be honest with you. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I mean, it was something that we all were pretty upset about, and I know it left a black eye in the community's eyes, and I know we lost trust in you guys, the school district did, and all we're doing is trying to kind of create some guardrails. Maybe I think at the last board meeting, Dr. Argonaut said he was going to create guardrails to maybe prevent these things from happening again, or when they do, we can hold people accountable appropriately, so to speak. And so I appreciate you taking the time to be here, and I know you guys put a lot of time into giving a bigger presentation, and I apologize that that was not allowed.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. Thank you, Mrs. Giuliani. And thank all of you for being patient through some misinformation, whatever we want to call it there. I think tonight we saw some SEL things with collaboration with each other, and these are skills we learn. Our next order of business is consent items. Do I have a motion to approve the consent items?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. As before, I have to go down through the roll call.
Amy, you look like you're in a haunted
And we will
house.
start with Mrs. Counts. Everyone wave. Mrs. Counts, yea or nay on approval of the consent items?
Yay.
You're multitasking, you're driving, aren't you? Mr. Daniels?
Yay.
Mr.
I'm not driving, my father's driving.
Okay. Mr. Alexander?
Yay.
And Mr. Hubbard?
I'm a yay.
You're negative?
Yay, yay.
Okay. And myself, yay, so that passes 5-0. Thank you all. Now we will move down to action items, and the 8.1 is the, to approve the 2021-2022 Return to School Plan, which was presented earlier. Do I have a motion on that from a board member?
Mr. Russell, I move that we approve the return to school plan for 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Do I have a second? I will Go ahead, Mr. Alexander,
I'll second it so we can have the discussion.
so we can have the discussion. Okay, we have a first and a second. Is there any questions or discussions?
I think for me, it's more of a comment or, on one hand, the governor issued an executive order, kind of, Mr. Jacobs is saying they want the local government to have more control, so the governor issues an executive order, and we find out an hour before the meeting that isn't true because of whatever code around having to quarantine and those types of things. So I think there's a definite disconnect somewhere between the governor's office and what's happening and the control that the local levels of government has. I like the plan better than the plan that we had to go with last year, because last year required masks and all sorts of crazy rules around quarantining, and we've had administrators watching video to figure out who should be quarantined and who shouldn't be quarantined, and continuing to quarantine healthy kids because they were sitting 3 feet next to somebody in class, I think is quite honestly a waste of our staff's time and energy. I think I've stated multiple times through the course of the pandemic that you quarantine for 2 reasons. The hospitalization rates are going up because we're taxing the hospital system, and the death rate's going up. Neither of which are occurring in Johnson County or in the state at the moment, if I understand the ID or the Department of Health's website's map here appropriately. So continuing to quarantine kids in school buildings is something that I find hard to believe we're having to continue to do this year, based on where things currently are. With all that being said, we have to have some kind of reopening plan. While this plan may not be perfect, I will support the plan tonight, but I would like for the administration to schedule a special meeting with the board so we can have further discussion about the quarantining rules. What does that look like? So we have a better understanding of that than what we've had in the past since, I think the board was on one path until 6 o'clock this evening, and we've kind of had to suddenly do an about face on where our the 2021-2022 reopening plan is. And here's the other thing. I mean, this is constantly evolving. I applaud the efforts of Mrs. Norman and Mr. Taylor. I can't believe all the hoops and things that these 2 individuals have had to jump through. I'd like to get them back to doing their actual day jobs and not figuring out who was sitting within 3 feet of somebody or who was too close to somebody at show choir practice or tennis practice or football practice. I'd like for, maybe we can talk a little bit more about that IC code. I struggle to give Dr. Arkanoff direction to knowingly violate an IC code, so anyhow, just my dissertation about COVID.
Can I add real quick? Because I know some of them are here and they came tonight, some of the great principals in the building that are the key to that contact tracing as well.
Sorry.
So, thank you folks. So, they really do help.
I also, I guess, I want to make a statement, a comment. Is Pam back there? Pam, can you pull up the slide 9 from that presentation? Is that possible? Because you refer to the Indiana Administrative Code, and I just want to give just a little bit of background of kind of what happened today. Just to put this in context. The Administrative Code tells us that we have to do this. It says we have to quarantine these students under these circumstances. So I want to start with the positives. The positives, we've got lower COVID numbers. The positives, we're going to have in-person learning. The positives, masks are going to be optional. All of those things are positives. We're going in the right direction. Let's hope we continue to go in the right direction. My colleague, Scott, made reference, quite accurately, I 100% agree, that we thought we were going in one direction with respect to quarantines. And this morning, an announcement came out that, oh, hey, you must follow administrative code as it relates to quarantines. I am not going to direct this school or our superintendent to not follow the law. And if the law tells us we have to follow this, that until they tell us otherwise, I've got to vote in favor of this plan that is going to include quarantines. My kid was quarantined. I was quarantined. My wife was. It wasn't fun. It's not fun for anybody. Nobody wants COVID. Nobody wants any of this stuff. But I cannot vote to have the superintendent, the school corporation, Amy, Jason, all those that put all their long hours into doing everything we can to try to keep people safe, to try to keep people healthy. We violate the law. I just can't do that in good conscience. So even though I'm not necessarily happy that we had to make this change, as Scott said, at 6 o'clock, I'm going to support this plan, but I do agree also that we need to continue to look at this. And can you go to the last slide? Another thing I really like about this plan, I went through, the numbers are down, in-person learning, masks are optional. But look at the last major bullet point. Dr. Arkanoff will be given authority to adjust the plan throughout the school year after consultation with the board and administration. The first sub-bullet under that says changes may be made based on increased or, let's hope, decreased spread in our school and our community. So stay tuned. While I'm going to vote tonight for this, that doesn't mean this is the end-all be-all and this is going to be what the rules are the entire year. Let's hope the spread slows down. Let's hope the spread stops, for goodness sake. So don't think that my vote today is necessarily thinking that the quarantine rule that we've been mandated to follow is a good idea, but it's the idea we're being told we have to follow. So thank you.
Mr. Hubbard, anything?
Yeah, I just, want to kind of second what they said, and thank you, Jason and Amy, for the hard work you guys put into this. And it kind of sucks that this kind of came down at the 11th hour from the state. But with that being said, I'm kind of, I'm ready for the principals to get back to doing their jobs. I'm ready for you guys to get back to doing your jobs. And for this to kind of come down like this, I think it's a slap in the face to the school district. I know there's other schools in the state that are basically thumbing their nose at that, and so I'm gonna vote no. I don't know where everybody else stands, but I'm voting no. I think it should be the community. So.
I understand.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard.
Hey, Joe, I'm not personally offended either.
You're an attorney, so. I know I look like one, but
Mrs. Counts, do you have any comments?
So I think everybody on the board spoke well. I think the surprise that we got this morning, I think that was a surprise to all of us. I personally that everybody's doing to try to get our kids back, but I'm a nay on this. I feel like that there are other things that we need to to figure out with the state and find the disconnect between the governor's office and our health department.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Counts. As all the comments lean towards, as I said earlier, we are charged with dealing with the federal, the state, and the county. All three of them don't decide to hold hands a whole lot of times. And that's what gets us into this mess and this last-minute situation. As Mr. Daniels said, and I think you alluded, within a week, it could all change. But we have to start with something and move from that point, so we have where we are, so the administration can also know what their marching orders are. So with nothing more to add,
Can we try and get that additional conversation scheduled before the start of school?
Absolutely, I'll work with Pam, we'll get a calendar out to.
I know
put it in.
trying to get
Yeah.
5 of us in the same place at the same time is a challenge, but.
herding cats. So, and I'm sure because the information that will come down to us, we will have to have that meeting on that
Yeah,
one.
absolutely, and as you know from last year, it changed. I don't think that, that's gonna be different this year. It's
My
gonna
guess
change and
between
change.
now and August 5th, there's
Yeah.
going to be 3 more changes that occur, so
Yeah.
Let's hope.
Yeah,
hopefully for the better.
hopefully for that, yeah.
We'll see if it's that long. Okay, if there's no further comments, we do need to vote on this. I've had a first by Mr. Daniels and a second by Mr. Alexander. Mr. Daniels, how do you vote?
I vote in favor, A.
Mr. Alexander?
Yay.
Mr. Hubbard?
Nay.
Mrs. Counts?
I think she already told us.
She'll get. She has to say it again. Mrs. Counts?
You can write it down for a nay. She said nay when
Yeah.
she was on.
I'll go ahead. I am a yay. Mrs. Counts, your vote on this? Gotta love technology.
She's a nay.
Good day. Thank you. Motion passes 3-2. Thank you, Board. Great discussion. Next order of business on action items is to approve the 2021-2022 Student Handbook. Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. See, this evening, I'm recommending that the board approve the changes to the 2021
He is back there.
2022 elementary and secondary student handbooks as presented, and Dr. Long will provide you with some additional information.
Thank you. I about cramped up after walking up here. I've been sitting so long, so sorry I'm a little slow getting up here.
Dr. Long, I'm going to stand. Don't take it personally.
Feel free, if anybody else would like to stand up. This is not the most exciting part of the night, obviously, but tonight we bring to the board the handbooks for the elementary, the middle school, and the high school. The one thing that I would say is our mask policy, or we called it our face covering policy that was in the handbook last year. We modified that so it matches what the board approved tonight. And it just says that the school corporation will follow the requirements provided by the Indiana Department of Health. If the Indiana Department of Health does not mandate masks, Center Grove Community School Corporation will not require masks. However, parents and students may choose to wear a mask if they desire. So that's a change in all 3 of the handbooks. So rather than have that individually 3 times, I wanted to make sure we covered that. If you want, which one do you have first, Pam? Do you want? Okay. So on the elementary handbook, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge Krista Nelson. She's the principal at Center Grove Elementary. She totally dismantled the elementary handbook and then put it all back together. It's probably been 10 to 12 years since we've really done that. Made it in line with the high school and middle school, so she did a really great job. Got input from Mrs. Phillips, Mr. Siner, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Rodman, or Mrs. Rodman, and Mr. Proctor. So they've done a really nice job, and I'm really proud of the way this handbook looks. And next year, Mrs. Nelson's going to help the middle schools do the same thing, so we get those in line as well. So she did such a good job, she got drafted again. Some of the new changes highlighted for the elementary school was a way to pick up, or the way to report an absence is in pickup patrol. So we wanted to make sure we had that. Probably the biggest change in in the handbook is under our attendance policy. It's an updated attendance policy on national competitions. So it reads that participation in a non-school sponsored state or national competition, a student who competes in a non-school sponsored state or national competition will be marked as an unexcused absence. We did a lot of research on this that's in line with probably almost 90% of the other school corporations that we surveyed. We think it's important. We want students to be actively involved in those, but we found this year that some kids missed 2 days for an event and other kids missed 7 days for the same event. So we try to make this uniform, and that again is a policy that both the middle school, high school, and the elementary school wanted to adopt and to add to their handbook. We added a little bit about in the transportation about students taking pictures and videoing other students on the bus. That just aligns more with the middle and high school policy too. And then an update is some updated costs. The teachers thought it was important for our parents and our students to know what it costs if they intentionally damage technology. So Mr. Taylor and his department put that in there, and so we added that. But those are the highlights. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Or do you want me to go on to the next middle school? And
We gotta do them as a package, so.
Sure, all right,
Yeah.
I'll go on. Middle school.
Hold all your questions till he goes through all
So
three.
Mrs. Lawson, Chris Griffin, Jake Holder, and Jeff Mendenhall all worked on this and really appreciate their efforts. I applaud their effort. They addressed three areas in the dress code for the students. I think they're all in a positive way. They added the wording that athletic shorts that provide adequate coverage are acceptable. That's more and more common. You guys know that if you've had children. The one thing that surprisingly is in here is that blankets, are carrying a blanket at school is not necessary and against policy. I thought that would be in the elementary one, but that's a middle school one. I know.
They won't wear a coat, but they'll bring a
I know,
blanket.
yeah. The other area is hair color. Our old policy just used to prohibit any unnatural hair color, and we've changed that now, or they're proposing to change that hair that distracts from a student's ability to learn or which causes a disruption in the classroom. We had a long conversation about does pink hair or blue hair really disrupt the educational process, and we found that probably it did not. So they're wanting to change that. They added to clarify the amount of days excused if they're sent home by the clinic, because not all students sent home by the nurse are required to be out the next day. This change allows the nurse to determine which days would be excused based on the situation or the reason that they're sent home. Doesn't change our fever policy or any of those other areas. Just I talked already about the national competition part, and then the homework agenda. This is different for the middle schools. They'll no longer receive a hard copy of the agenda. It'll be online like it is at the high school. And they did reflect that in the fees that you guys approved, I think, or that the board approved a month or so ago. So they no longer charge students for a hard copy of an agenda. For the high school handbook policy changes, Jeff Harkin, Teresa Owens, Laura Burkhart, and Troy Burkhart all worked on this, and I appreciate their efforts. Really minor changes, but I just wanted to share them with the board. We used to just mail a letter home about attendance, but we're including a mail or an email, so more people are easily reached by email than they are by the regular mail. A big change for them in the academic dishonesty area. The new policy states that students will receive a 0 for the assignment and may result in a loss of credit for the grading period. And then the third offense, students will fail the course and will result in a loss of credit for the semester. So that's just a change in the second and third offense part of the academic dishonesty. Again, we talked about the national competition part for all three handbooks. The S to the fifth program, you know that if you have attendance and grades, we allow students to skip through part of their finals. With COVID, they modified that policy because not every student was in school every single day. They're really asking to return back to their previous attendance requirement that it says each semester a student can be absent a total of 2 days in the classes they elect not to take a final exam. Exempted college days are defined by the school policy, not included in those 2 days. So students can do an official college visit and it doesn't count as part of those 2 days. And each senior can select a total of 4 final exams, which they'd like to be exempt. And the other change that's linked to that, again, it was COVID related. This goes back to the previous policy prior to last year, is that a student must be present during the respective class period of the final exam in order to be exempt. So those are the highlights or the lowlights, depending on your opinion. But we're recommending approval of all those changes for the elementary and secondary handbooks.
Any questions for Dr. Long? Real quick, these now are, once finished, are always online at all 3 levels.
They all are always online. In the elementary schools, we still give out a paper copy that we send home for the parents, but they'll also be available online.
Okay. Any other questions?
What about the no hair? Is that?
I'm all for that. You know that.
Interrupt class?
Yeah. It doesn't disrupt class.
Well, there's a glare, but anyway. Okay, seeing there's no other questions, do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the 2021-2022 student handbooks as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. We'll start, Mrs. Counts? Yay or nay?
Aye.
Mr. Hubbard?
I'm a yay.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye.
Mr. Daniels?
Yay.
And myself, yay. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Long. Our next order of business is to accept bids for the high school renovation project Phase 2. And I assume that's Dr. Long.
Yeah, thank you. This evening, I'm recommending that the board approve the changes to, I'm sorry. I'm recommending that, I'm recommending that the board accept the bids for Phase 2 of the high school renovation project. And you know, Dr. Long, people always leave when you get up.
I know. I think it was the pink hair comment. I don't know what that was. I lost them at that, apparently.
But please go ahead and provide some additional information.
Thanks. Tonight, Jim Goley from AECom Hunt is with us, and I'm probably going to have to buy Jim lunch. I didn't know we were going to be here this long, and I told him to get here early. So I did give him tomorrow off, even though he doesn't work for us. So on July 1st of this year at 11 o'clock, we received bids relative to the renovation of the Center Grove High School Phase 2. We received a total of 10 bids and 2 combination bids. And after that, the Lancer and Beebe, our architects, and AECom Hunt and Jim's team did a D-scope meeting with all the low bidders. And based on their review, they're recommending that we accept all the following bids with the alternates that include alternates 1 through 8. The really good news is they all came in under our budget, which allowed us to do every single alternate that we had listed. So we were pleasantly surprised by that, which means by the time we're done with this, we'll have touched all of the classrooms at the high school. So it's really pretty exciting. So we're recommending approval of the general trades packet to R.L. Turner Corporation in the amount of $6,202,000. Bid packet 2 for mechanical, plumbing, and fire suppression be awarded to Shambaugh & Sons for $3,287,534. The electrical and technology packet awarded to James Babcock for $1,386,000. Bid packet 4, lighting general, awarded to Energy Harness Corporation for $131,825. And bid packet 5, lighting in general for the tunable classrooms, also awarded to Energy Harness for the amount of $67,500. That's a total of $11,074,859. And like I said, it came in under our estimate, and it came in under our budget amount too. So we're recommending that the board approve all of these bids, or accept all of these bids.
Thank you, Dr. Long. Are there any questions for Dr. Long on the bid process?
Just a couple of questions. First, glad to hear it came under budget, but I hate to have Jim sit back there and not at least get to answer one question. He's been very patient.
Oh, no, he's waiting on my standard question. Go ahead.
Well, I know what yours is, but on the general trades, $6,200,002, we only got one bid. What do we think?
Well, the day it bid, we actually had 3 companies come to this building and bid. And what I've heard after the fact, structural steel bids were scarce. And the 2 bidders that were also here never received a structural steel bid.
Oh, wow.
So hence, they didn't want to risk the risk of putting a wag, if you would, into the bid. So they decided not to submit a bid.
So it was a shortage of supplies, you believe, that led to the, because I know not too long ago, we bid the Emergency Operations Center, and I think one of the packages, we had 15, 20 people submit bids.
Yeah, so, and we ran into a similar situation in Pleasant Grove, right, too, but we was able to get enough bidders at the time to help get some competitive bidders.
And I ask that for 2 reasons. One, to see the trending as we plan, as of what comes next. And then second, I'm assuming you're really recommending acceptance, because if it goes back out, there's a chance the steel's even more scarce.
Yeah, and as Dr. Long said, it was under our estimate, and so,
And the nice thing too is R.L. Turner's currently working on the pool and the phase 1 of the renovation as well. So we're familiar
So
with their
they're
work
familiar.
and,
Great.
right, and so we're pleased with the leadership that they provide too.
Thank you.
So with approval here in a minute, when do you plan to start?
August, just a second, August as soon as they can. I don't think permits are gonna be a challenge, so probably early August, and we'll be done by July of 2022.
July 2022.
He stole your second question.
Write that one down, kids.
Got plans right now, Scott, just so you know, phase 1 and then phase 2 are both gonna end at the exact same time.
Okay.
Will be done, as Bill mentioned, the entire high school project will be done by July of 2022.
And Jim and Bill, since we do have folks here, could you just give a quick overview what phase 2 is? Because I don't think we.
Phase 2 will be some renovation of some of the classrooms that we didn't touch, but primarily it's the backfill of the old pool and the creation of an art area. So we'll put the art rooms over there. And then we also are going to put the wrestling room, relocating the wrestling room, making that room an LGI, or large group instruction room. And then the old art classrooms will be renovated into being just traditional classrooms. So we'll gain about 7 or 8 classrooms out of that by the time we're done.
Any other questions or comments?
New pool's beautiful, just FYI.
And just to compliment on getting done ahead of schedule there, how long?
Yeah, we were about almost 45 days ahead of schedule and under
Great job,
budget,
guys.
so that means June, Mr. Alexander.
I got it, that means June, and, hey, Jim, my wife was happy to hear that you were done a little early.
The students will be very happy when it's all done as well. And we're still waiting on the video of Dr. Long jumping in the pool.
Not gonna happen.
Okay, seeing as no further discussion, do I have we didn't do a.
Mr. President, I move that we accept the bids for phase 2 of the high school renovation project.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Start with you, Mr. Daniels.
Yay.
Yay. Mr. Alexander?
Yay.
Mr. Hubbard?
Yay.
Mrs. Counts?
Yay.
Thank you. And I am a yay,
Just
so it
drive
passes
forward.
5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes business there. We'll go on to other business. Anyone?
Not tonight, we've been here.
Mr.
long
Hubbard, Mr. Alexander, any other business? Mr. Daniels?
enough. Did you have any?
Any final comments?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got one.
Or do you have anything from Central 9?
No. School board members we're all voted in on like nonpartisan tickets, I guess. And I'm kind of seeing stuff on Facebook because of, you know, with teachers or people are kind of making comments about teachers kind of implementing their religion or their sexual preference or their ideology, whatever it may be. And so people are trying to get political stuff around for that, and I really hope we don't get to that point, you know. We really don't want that on boards, so that's really the only thing that I got.
Mr. Alexander, anything? Mr. Daniels?
No, I guess I'll just second briefly what Joe said. I mean, as I said when I stood up and ran the second time, you know, we educate all the children. No matter who the kid is, we don't pick our children, they pick us. We're a public school, we'll always be a public school. No matter where they are, we want to meet them where they're at, we want to make them better. That's our job. No matter what, that is our job, exceptional educational experiences. So the only other thing I want to add is for those that support the Center Grove Education Foundation, know about it. The gala's coming up in August. There's still tickets available. Please, 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 it's a wonderful organization. It provides additional funding for things that we don't have the money to do. Extra things for teachers, extra things, grants and the like. So please, if you can make it to the gala, it's a really nice event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Mrs. Counts, do you have any comments?
Rob stole it.
Amy, I'm sorry, I should have let you done that.
Buy tickets to the gala, so please, everybody, if you've never been, it's actually I'm really sorry, a really great time. I've been several years. It is a great organization, served on the board for 4 years. Please come out and support them.
And Amy, it's August 14th, correct?
14th.
Correct.
Correct. And besides it being a great event, it raises a lot of funds that are used for grant money back into the education system here at Center Grove, especially grants to the teachers. It's just a great opportunity on that one. Dr. Arkanoff, do you have any comments?
Yeah, sure. There we go. I know that a lot of folks left, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to share a little bit. First thing is the parent information meeting that's next week. You know, it's not a sit and get forum. I mean, there will be a presentation. Christy, by the way, I think if she's still here. There you are. You moved around, didn't you? Yeah, so great job tonight. I know you're going to present that again. It's important that people provide information, questions to her ahead of time so her and the team can research and get answers to that. It's not about conjuring up things. I mean, we're a professional organization and we want to address the questions ahead of time and be able to do that. But not only that, there will be breakouts during those meetings where her and Dr. Hoover, right over there, and the rest of the teaching and learning department will be breaking out and facilitating conversations with parents so that you'll have an opportunity to have a more intimate conversation with those that formulate these lessons. Another thing is that I want to just say it again, we do not use CASEL, and those lessons that we're putting together will not be anything from CASEL. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, and Christy said that. We are independent of that. The other thing, there was some question about videoing in the classroom and so forth. And one of the things I'd like to say is, and I believe it's still there, Mrs. Nelson, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that your school has put together some examples online, am I correct, of teaching many different subjects. And so, Learn CG. Thank you, yes. And so you can actually see those things. You've been doing that for a couple of years now. It's great work. I've watched a few and really enjoyed that. Lastly, the comment was made about, it's on the website, it's on Center Grove Elementary's website. /LearnCG. /LearnCG. Thank you. Lastly, the comments about employees and what we do when employees cross the line or make mistakes and so forth. And we have policies for that. And we deal with that appropriately. That is not something that we share out in a community forum. That is confidential, as everyone should understand. So when discipline is taken, we don't pronounce that to the world. So we have a system in place through an evaluation model that we use. We respect privacy for folks when it comes to that, and our leaders do an excellent job in overseeing that process. And Mr. Taylor in the Human Resources Department does a great job of making sure that we do that within the law and protecting the privacy of everyone involved. So I just want to make sure people understand we do have a process for that. So with that, I think the only other thing that I wanted to make sure is the pool will have we're going to have a open house for the new natatorium, and also it's along the same time that we're dedicating the track to Mrs. Toomey, and that will be on August 27th, and we'll have more information out about that. So.
Thank you, Dr. Okanoff. I think a lot of the comments have already been made. We do appreciate very much. I wish everyone was still here. And I wish we had this kind of involvement at all times, no matter what the subject matter is. You are our checks and balances as the parents. If you were here tonight, you probably have a home that is a loving, caring home for your child. Not the case for a lot of homes. It's a different situation. So that faces us with the responsibility of how do we get those children to be connected, involved, able to learn their lessons as well as not prevent others from learning their lessons. So this is the picture we are working with, and but I do want to reiterate, by all means, stay involved, be a part of the strategic planning committee that's coming up, as hopefully everything stays healthy, so we can move forward with that. That is where you can get your voices heard again. So please pass that along with everyone. And again, pass it along about the meeting next Wednesday. The opportunities will be there for having the back and forth and the understanding with each other. So with that, there's a few other dates. Next board meeting is August 19th here in the boardroom. September's meeting has been moved. It is now going to be on September 23rd, the following Thursday instead. Several conflicts going on that evening. And the rest of you took the rest of the dates I had on that one. So seeing no further issues, the board meeting is adjourned.